ดีค่ะ Distinguished speakers, participants, good afternoon, good morning, and good evening to all who are joining us live from different parts of the world today. Myself is Montip Sri Ratana, Director of Digital Belt and Road International Center of Excellence, in short DIBA ICOE, Bangkok, National Research Council of Thailand. I'm honored to welcome you to the International Conference, Thailand and the Sustainable Development Goals, the role of international agencies. The United Nations Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, represent an urgent call to action in a global partnership to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure that everyone enjoys peace and prosperity. This conference will discuss the status of the SDGs in Thailand and the role of international agencies. From the last two conferences on Thailand and the SDGs held earlier this year, on their policies, approaches, programs, and best practices that support the SDG implementation in Thailand, we harness these valuable experiences, learn and share them within and beyond Thailand. Without further ado, I would like to welcome Dr. Viparat Diong, Executive Director of the National Research Council of Thailand, to give her opening remarks. Dr. Viparat, please.
Distinguished speakers and participants, good afternoon. It's my great pleasure to deliver opening remarks for the International Conference on Thailand and Sustainable Development Goals, the role of international agency. I'm deeply grateful to the partner organization of NRCT, namely the United Nations and the UN Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, UNESCAP, the Digital Belt and Road, DIBA, and to our collaborating organizations, namely the National Economic and Social Development Council of Thailand, NESDC, Mahidol University, and the Iucn of Technology for the strong support they have given to make this conference a reality. I also thank all speakers and moderators and their respective organizations for their contributions. NRCT is the principal organization in Thailand, which guides the development of the country and public policy by using research, including the integration and the administration of national research budget. NRCT administers research work with professional standards by using moral principles to its achievement. NRCT employs these values and principles in its delivery of research and development program in alignment with the UN Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals. Earlier this year, the NRCT provided support to organize two national conferences under the theme Thailand and the Sustainable Development Goals, learning and boosting implementation together. Following the success of the national conference, this international conference is a continuation, offering an opportunity to learn about the approach and program supported by international agencies in support of Thailand implementation of the SDG. Representatives from a broad spectrum of international agencies with office in Thailand will describe how their program contribute to the achievement of the SDG in Thailand, and in case where this program may have a wider reach regionally as well. participant expert to hear experience from international development institutions, environmental development, NGO, and others. These presentations will provide a fuller understanding of the various roles being played by the international community in contributing to the achievement of SDG here in Thailand and key lessons they have learned in their work here, as well as raise awareness among Thai and regional participants. More generally, I'm confident that the outcome of this international conference will be valuable in learning the status of SDG implementation in Thailand and the role of international agencies. I wish the conference well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Viparat Biyong, Executive Director of the National Research Council of Thailand. Now I call on Mr. Nattawat Krishnamara, Director General of the International Organizations Department, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Mr. Nattawat, please.
Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to begin by expressing my appreciation to the National Research Council of Thailand for the kind invitation for me to speak at this important gathering. I am very happy to see the enthusiasm of the academic community in contributing towards driving forward the SDGs. The conference theme of the role of international agencies is pertinent. Thailand is currently working closely with the UN Resident Coordinator and her team, as well as the UN country team as a whole, to draft the UN Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework, or UN SDCF, which will guide the cooperation between the Royal Thai government and the UN towards sustainable development and the SDGs in Thailand. This is indeed an important year for SDGs implementation as we enter the decade of action amid the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic that continues to hit hard on all countries, particularly developing countries. It is also an important year for Thailand as we presented our second voluntary national review, or VNR, on the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development to the High-Level Political Forum, or HLPF, this July. We took stock of our progress on SDGs implementation, and we also identified the remaining challenges. At the same time, we also recognized that the VNR drafting process itself was important. As we move ahead, it is well understood that progress would need to be made on several of the SDGs. For instance, on poverty eradication, SDG 1, good health and well-being, SDG 3, and reduced inequalities, SDG 10. In building back better, Thailand's message to our partners is that we are determined to take transformative change towards a resilient and sustainable development. Indeed, the academic, research, and scientific communities, as well as international agencies, have an important role to play in driving this transformation. In his remarks at the SDG Moment 2021 during the 76th session of the United Nations General Assembly on Monday, the Prime Minister highlighted 3 milestones in Thailand's pathway towards SDGs attainment, which I would like to take the liberty of drawing upon. First is promoting good health and well-being for people of all ages. This is especially relevant to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. Thailand has been fortunate in that it has a robust public health system and inclusive universal health coverage, but this needs nurturing. An adequate budget allocation for healthcare has become an immediate priority for all nations, in tandem with the upscaling of medical industries and public health services to ensure self-reliance during times of crisis. Second, in building back the economy in a post-COVID-19 recovery phase, Thailand will emphasize a balance of all things approach. The Bio-Circular Green Economy Model, or BCG, will help generate more balanced growth by developing sustainable and environment-friendly industries that are built on Thailand's strengths in biodiversity, value will be added through the use of science, technology, and innovation, and the cooperation of all our partners, including international agencies, will be vital. Third, digital technology is here to stay. But with COVID-19 revealing hidden vulnerabilities in society, especially among those who lack access to these technologies for learning and income generation, closing the digital divide and promoting digital literacy is key to unlocking the people's potential. And this is where partnership comes in. As we conclude the new cooperation framework of the UN this year, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs will work with the NESDC and the UN to garner views and comments from all relevant Thai agencies and partners. It is incumbent on all of us to use resources wisely and ensure that our engagement with international agencies correspond to the country's development needs and the pathway towards SDGs attainment. I wish the conference all the success.
Thank you very much, Mr. Natawat Krishnamara, Director General of the International Organizations Department, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Now I call on Ms. Gita Chasbrawal, the United Nations Resident Coordinator for Thailand, to give a message. Ms. Gita, please.
Thank you, Dr. Montes. It is my pleasure to co-host the SDG National Conference today, focusing on the role of international agencies in advancing the 2030 Agenda. First, let me thank Dr. Viparath with the National Research Council, Khun Natawat from the MFA, and Dr. Thattai at the NESDC for our close collaboration. Let us be very clear. The partnerships we see reflected here is absolutely essential to the attainment of the SDGs, the global blueprint for dignity, peace, and prosperity for people and the planet, as well as Thailand's national development strategy. This is a great responsibility that requires equal commitment from all sides. In my remarks today, I want to focus on the whole of society approach, which is necessary for progress towards the SDGs, how the UN is contributing in Thailand through the UN Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework, and finally, end on a note of optimism about growing awareness and commitment to these shared goals. The pandemic are a reminder about the interconnectedness, not only of challenges, but also solutions. Pull one thread and the entire social fabric is affected. The UN Secretary General has a stark message for all of us. The choices we make or fail to make today could result in further breakdown or a breakthrough to a greener, better, and safer future. The cost of inaction is clear, but so too is the real potential to build a better world if we work together now. Highland brings unique strengths to the table. The vibrant and dynamic civil society is exemplified in the spirit of volunteerism and community solidarity demonstrated during the pandemic. As a regional hub, both a provider and a recipient of South-South and triangular cooperation, Thailand contributes to and benefits from the strong ties in Southeast Asia and across the world. Another key player is the private sector, which has an essential role in leading on sustainable financing. Next week, the UN will co-host with the Minister of Finance and the government's pensions fund a dialogue to scale up commitments by banks and investors to adopt the UN sustainable principles for banking and investment, laying the foundation for long-term green and sustainable development. In Thailand, the Global Compact Network has already committed $40 billion over a 10-year period towards the attainment of the SDGs. At the upcoming roundtable in October, the private sector is expected to agree on further ambitious targets to reduce CO2 emissions. It is important to remember, when we talk about civil society, it includes all of us. Strengthening the bonds that holds us together provides the bedrock for our work towards common goals of a sustainable future, requires empathy and outreach, especially across generations. Young people made up the largest segment in Thailand in a recent global survey, in which they resoundingly responded that they favor working together on development, climate change, and peace and security issues. We need to include, listen, and also be led by the youth. The UN is reaching out through many avenues, including the SDGs Youth Panel, an advisory board and country team, and the Youth as Researchers program, where young people will have the opportunity to make policy recommendations. Going forward, we will also be institutionalizing civil society dialogues to bring a full range of perspectives to inform policy and strategy in country. Over the recent months, we've been engaging in comprehensive consultations with key actors, including with many of you here today, to inform the UN Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework. The framework brings UN's work here into alignment with national development goals and the transition from natural resource-based industries towards a high-value added economy. A key focus of this integrated work is the inclusive economy based on green, low carbon, and sustainable development. Work in this area is already accelerating, with UNIDO having leveraged $18 million from the private sector to scale up technology solutions for the steel and aluminum industries led by the Ministry of Industry. The cooperation framework is also about investing in human capital. The role of education, and especially STEM and ICT, is the key enabler. The Girls in ICT initiative, jointly undertaken by ITU and UNICEF with government and the private sector, is focusing on gender inclusion and the school to work pipeline. This lays the foundation for full participation in the tech economy, buttressed by ILO's partnership with the largest hard disk manufacturer in the country to train technical and soft skills. That brings me to the third pillar of the cooperation framework, ensuring that those at risk of being left furthest behind can participate and benefit from development, free from all forms of discrimination. We are working with the government and other actors to strategically adjust and adapt the existing social security schemes to include the self-employed and assure mobility of benefits moving between formal and the informal labor markets. This is just a brief glimpse into the UN's work, with much more to be done in areas such as promotion of sustainable growth for SMEs and community businesses, cities, reducing the number of people living in poverty and ensuring no one is left behind. We all follow the news and we all know that the challenges are considerable. Yet the causes for optimism are equally clear if we look. There is an overwhelming public appetite for more and more effective international cooperation, with more inclusion enabling women, young people, and marginalized communities to share in leadership and ownership. The potential is limitless if we commit to working together. I very much look forward to today's discussion on the role of international agencies in supporting Thailand, learning from each other and moving forward together to achieve our shared goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Geeta Sabharwal, the United Nations Resident Coordinator for Thailand. Next, I want to call on Dr. Thattai Kiratipong Phaiboon, Director, International Strategy and Coordination Division, National Economic and Social Development Council, or NESDC, Thailand. Dr. Thattai, please.
Dr. Vitharat Diong, Executive Director, National Research Council of Thailand. Dr. Natawat Chidamara, Director General, International Organization Department, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Geeta Sabharwal, the United Nations Resident Coordinator for Thailand. Dr. Montip Siratana, distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. First of all, I would like to express my sincere appreciation to NRCT, the UN, the SCAP, Mahidol University, DBAR, and AIT for organizing this virtual conference. I believe that this event will identify a lot of international organizations and their contributions, as well as capitalize on these efforts to accelerate SDGs in this decade of actions. It is my pleasure to know that the participants today come from various agencies. Some of you might be aware that currently Thailand has a roadmap for SDG implementations. Partnership has also been mentioned in the roadmap as one of the key factors to drive the countries to achieve the SDGs by 2030. It is why we are here today. We need all of you to work together in order to achieve an inclusive and sustainable development. In these days, the government of Thailand has put many efforts on SDG implementations at both national and local levels. We have done a number of projects contribute to advancing our 20 goals and also developed the country's database, which is important for the M&E process. In order to implement a concept of sustainable development at provincial and local levels, NSDC, together with the Ministry of Interior and the NSO, or the National Statistical Office, have explored 9+5 pilot areas, which are 9 provinces and 5 local administrative organizations across the countries. Again, some of you might have the questions whether Thailand's development plans are aligned with the global agenda. It can be assured that the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development is very well aligned with National Development Agenda. Both the 20 years national strategies and the NSDP, or National Economic and Social Development Plan, have been formulated by embracing the 2030 agendas and the Sustainable Development Goals as one of their key principles. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, I would like to thank NRCTs and the relevant agencies, especially Dr. Montip Siratana for organizing this event. I believe that the discussion today will provide crucial information and critical ideas to accelerate the SDGs, and also to identify a role of international organizations as an active and engaged partner for sustainable development. I wish you all fruitful discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Thatthai Kiratiphong Phaiboon, Director, International Strategy and Coordination Division, National Economic and Social Development Council, Thailand. And that concludes our opening session. The conference is designed to delve into 4 important issues in SDGs implementations, namely big data, restoring a green planet, localization of SDGs, and SDGs financing. Now, let us start with the presentations. I'd like to start session 2. It is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Arman Bidapaknia from the Statistics Division of the UNSCAP as moderator for session 2, Innovative Big Data Approaches to SDGs. Mr. Arman, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Montip, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Arman Bidapaknia. I'm the head of Statistical Data Management Unit at the UNSCAP Statistics Division, and I have the honor to moderate this first very interesting session on the topic of innovative big data for SDGs. We have 2 speakers today. The first one is Ms. Irina Bernal. Irina is an international consultant on big data for sustainable development, and she is currently working with UNSCAP Statistics Division to develop a strategy for big data statistics for the region and support countries to apply that. And the second speaker with us today is Dr. Chiu Yubao. Dr. Chiu Yubao is a research professor and chair of Digital Belt and Road Program Working Group for High Mountain and Cold Region, HIMAC. Thank you, Dr. Yubao and Irina, for being with us today. Unfortunately, we will not have Q&A live, but please feel free to use chat box. And if you have any questions for presenters, please put in the chat box your question, and presenters will be able to respond to you directly on the chat box. Each presentation will be around 15 minutes, and we will start with Irina. Irina, over to you.
Greetings, everyone. It is my honor to speak to you today about how countries in Asia and the Pacific use big data for national SDGs monitoring and how Thailand could benefit from these findings to improve its monitoring of the SDGs. The findings that I present today are the result of ESCAP Statistics Division research on the uses of alternative sources of data for official statistics and monitoring of the SDGs. ESCAP has been very active in the big data space for the last couple of years. There is a lot of interest from national statistical offices in the region to use new data sources for official statistics, and this interest was confirmed at the last Regional Committee on Statistics in 2020 that brought together heads of the national statistical offices. ESCAP is also an active member of the UN Committee of Experts on Big Data and Data Science for Official Statistics and several of its task teams, such as on mobile phone data, Earth observation data, and training competencies and capacity building. Several countries in the region are also members of these task teams and contribute to their initiatives. Last year, our division also launched the Stats Cafe, a series of webinars dedicated to official statistics with multiple sessions dedicated to big data. Another initiative launched at the same time is the Data Integration Community of Practice, which brings together statisticians and development partners to share national data integration efforts, including of non-traditional data sources, such as data from the private sector. All of our big data related events are very well attended. Lastly, we have been actively documenting our findings and providing technical assistance to the national statistical offices in the region. At the end of my presentation, I will share a list of relevant resources. When we talk about, when we look at the SDG data availability, particularly in Asia Pacific, we can observe that despite significant progress, it remains poor. 129 SDG indicators have no or insufficient data to measure progress. For goals SDG 5, gender equality, 11, sustainable cities and communities, and 14, life below water in particular, data remains insufficient or missing for at least 80% of the indicators. Here is the snapshot of SDG data availability in Thailand that you can also consult on the SDG Gateway for Asia Pacific. There are 112 indicators, about half of them with sufficient data, while 101 indicators have no or insufficient data. Here, please note that the number of indicators refers to the global indicators and not the national indicators. Similarly to the situation in the entire region, Thailand has significant insufficient or missing data for SDGs 5, 11, 14, and 16 on peace, justice, and strong institutions. There are many data sources that already are or could be used for SDG monitoring and implementation and could potentially address the existing data gaps. This image illustrates the traditional sources that are usually collected by governments, NSOs, and international organizations, as well as non-traditional data, such as Earth observation, citizen-generated, or private sector data. Last year, ESCAP conducted a research to understand how national statistical offices in the region use big data to produce official statistics and monitor the SDGs. What we found is that the use of big data is still at an exploratory stage, mostly complementing or validating traditional data sources and results. Many of the big data projects are single pilots that do not necessarily translate into further research or data source integration. That being said, there are some examples of NSOs that are actively building their data infrastructure and developing internal capacity working with big data. Big data partnership models are also evolving from CSR, where companies shared free data as part of their corporate social responsibility, to several other models, such as commercial, where companies are paid marginal or market price for data or insights, reciprocity models, where companies may get data or insights, such as their market share, in return for data they provide. And lastly, a legislative approach, where organizations, both public and private, are obliged to share data for statistical purposes. When it comes to data sources explored by the national statistical offices, scanner data and online price data have most of the NSO's attention for producing price statistics. The interest in mobile phone data is growing in the region, with several countries already having access to this data source, such as Indonesia, Georgia, Republic of Korea, and New Zealand. But there are many challenges accessing the data and especially securing long-term access to data or insights on population mobility. Social media data is mostly used in pilot projects, particularly for conducting sentiment analysis, and other data sources such as bank transactions, smart meter data, AAS, or others are only explored in individual countries and at a much smaller scale. Earth observation data, on the other hand, is getting attention of governments and the NSOs, particularly to produce environment and agriculture statistics. And Earth observation is highly explored big data source for monitoring the SDG indicators. In fact, according to our findings, 39 SDG indicators across 8 goals can benefit from geospatial information. This is according to the publications of the Group on Earth Observations, an interagency and expert group on SDG indicators on geospatial information. We have identified and documented 16 country examples, with 2 additional examples for indicators other than the 39 listed. In the context of Thailand, it is important to note that the Geoinformatics and Space Technology Development Agency, GISDA, has satellite data and provides products and services that could be used for both monitoring and implementation of the 2030 agenda. Our research into country-level big data practices across the world, so that these numbers go beyond our region, revealed interesting figures. We have found 156 examples of big data used by countries, of which 79 examples using citizen science data, all from the Philippines, 73 using geospatial data from 22 countries, and 4 using mobile phone data. Next, we identified 103 examples led by the NSOs, or only 24 if we exclude the Philippines. These examples include NSOs outside our region. Indicator 15.1.1, forest area as a percentage of total land area, has the highest number of examples, which is 11. And indicator 1.3.1, proportion of population covered by social insurance programs, has the highest number of examples, specifically from the NSOs, which is 7. We have also identified the most common challenges of moving from big data experiments to integration. Many NSOs, for example, note limitations in the current legal frameworks that prevent them from using alternative sources of data to produce official statistics. In the case of Thailand, we have noted that its current statistical legislation does limit the data sources that could be used to produce official statistics and hence to monitor the SDGs. Data privacy and personal data protection is of a paramount importance when considering big data use. There are cases where some governments and NSOs did not pursue the use of big data source they had experimented with due to the negative perception of the data integration or use. This refers to the use of both administrative and private sector data. Data access is also a challenge, especially the negotiation with the private sector and finding a win-win data access model, but getting long-term data access as opposed to one-off experiments bring additional complexity. Technological infrastructure and investments that it requires may also be an impediment, especially for governments and NSOs with limited resources. Same applies to the need to build internal capacity within organizations. Last but not least, the challenges, including technical, that differ from data source to data source, but these challenges are identified once data access is granted. There are several key takeaways and next steps on the use of big data for statistics and SDGs. The use of big data remains a challenge despite increasing big data experimentation by countries and incremental improvements in the SDG monitoring at the regional level. Most of the country big data efforts concentrate around production of price statistics and the use of geospatial data for the SDGs. Some NSOs have dedicated efforts for exploring uses of big data for SDGs. A key next step is to turn the big data opportunity into a new norm by using big data sources in the voluntary national reviews and fostering partnerships across geospatial and scientific communities, environment agencies, and academia. In some countries, including Thailand, this may require also a review of the national legislative framework. Lastly, help is available at the country, regional, and global levels. For those of you interested to learn more about specific country examples of using various big data sources, which may be helpful for supporting Thailand in its monitoring of the SDGs using big data, I invite you to consult our ASCA publications with references provided here on this slide. On this note, I end my presentation and thank you all for your attention and wish you a very fruitful discussion.
Thank you very much, Irina. Very interesting presentation. Thanks for providing an overview of the relevance of big data to SDGs, the availability, and you have highlighted important challenges from technical to legislation challenges, but also provided good examples of the use of big data, which give us lots of hope that the use of big data in the future will be increasing in terms of monitoring SDGs, including in Thailand. So this puts us in a context and prepare us for the next presentation from Dr. Yubao, which is going to tell us how actually big data is being used in certain areas. Dr. Yubao, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yes, we can hear you clearly.
Okay, I need to share my screen and let me see. Okay, and it's okay for.
Yes, it's okay.
See me? Okay.
Also, put it on the slides. That's great.
Okay. So how many minutes should I have?
You have between 15 to 20 minutes.
Okay, so I will use. Thank you. Thank you for inviting us to present our digital beta and the loader program here. especially for the sustainable development goals using the biggest data. So this is my presentation title. It's about the DBAR. So as you may know, DBAR is one of the sustainable development empowered by data science. It's a program initiated by Chinese Academy of Sciences and also with the international stakeholders. And we're really happy to see the International Center of Excellence in Thailand, Bangkok. So Professor and Dr. Mausip hosted that ICOE, and today my title is biggest data for the SDGs in the Belt and Road region. I would like to introduce these programs. So my presentation includes 3 parts. One of the science, technology, and innovation to support the global challenges, not only in the, for example, SDGs. So as we all know, the UN systems, they identify a really big umbrella for the global policy. So this is a global concern. One of the UN SDG, another is a Paris Agreement, that is a climate action, and also the disaster risk reduction. This is Sendai framework. So now we focus on the first one. It's about the how to use the technology facilitations mechanism to support the SDGs. So you will see in under those we have different forums. The first one, UN interagency task team of the SDI for the goals. So this is what we do, and also the second is a multi-stakeholder forum on the science, technology, and innovation for the SDGs. That is STI forum, and the online platform that is more about the infrastructures, like big data is at this emergency like COVID-19 time. The big data is a good tools and also a good reservoir for all of the people to benefit from those development. So what is the science, technology, and innovation? We can see many SDGs targets are released to the STI, are related to STI progress. So here from our project, and we see 14 directly to link with the SDGs, and 34 relatively, and then more than 121 indirectly. That will say for the science and technology innovation can totally address more than 48, something like 500 directly. We can work for that. So emphasis, the second in the emphasis the importance of role of SDG in the SDGs. So here is facilitating mechanism. So something like our DBAR is one of the program that can help the people and the stakeholders to work together to build the data innovation and to support the SDG evaluation. So this is our work and our main aims. The third is to emphasize the key role of the STI community in the SDG. That will say we concern not about the people community, and also provide the data, expertise, and evidence to support the SDG evaluation, and also to address the challenges from those regional and local or national development. So here I will, at one of the subset of the big data. So the data relevant with the Earth system science, we call them the biggest data, and that is more about the spatial, geospatial, or timeline, or maybe not long history geospatial data that is really relevant to the people who, to the place, the people who are living. So that is we can understand it as a physical model, mathematical model, and or information model and computer model of the Earth. So as you may know that we have a community of the digital Earth. So that is one of the framework of the Earth system science. But the data is one of like a blood that in that framework. So here it's the background. Then let's go into the DBAR. What is DBAR? DBAR is one of the program initiated by the initial 2016, and remember that, and we have many focus on the, the ocean cycle load and also the land focus cycle load. So we have lots of the vaster area to to be relevant with the sustainable development, and also a big group of people over there. So this is a map of the cycle load economic belt and also maritime cycle load. So you can see Thailand is one of the most important. As maybe Monsip knows that I was the person who working in the not Beihai, is in the Guangxi capital Nanning to set up a regional center to and also there to link with the Iucn region to think about the biggest data to support the SDGs. So here's the background. In 2016 May, and we have the Earth observation for batten and load, and giving the full support by the more than 20 countries to set up the DBAR. So this is the program at the very first time. Here, Professor Guo and also my former boss, because I was working with the geosecretariat in Geneva for 3 years. So Barbara Roy also to support us from the Earth observations. And from here, you can see also we have a Pan-Euro Asia experiment that was initiated by the Professor Marco Gurmana in Finland, and with Russia and also China and Finland, and also lots of the Europe countries. So here we can see we have, yes, we totally use the STI for the SDGs around the batten load. Here you can see the disaster reduction and also the Paris Agreement, and also we can see SDG goals. But actually, we link those together to address the global policy or global concerns. So here's a workflow. So we can see we have 9 working groups, and include the biggest data platform to support the batten and load region. And from the basis, we can see that data streams is about the Earth observations from the satellite and also the in-situ measurement, ground observations. You can see from the maps of the on top of the glacier. And we have a platform, we have working groups. As one of them to support the actually is Arctic and yeah, we can see support the cold region, Arctic and the cold region. And then we get the SDG highlights report from that. That is we focus on the DBAR foresight. So we're linked with the international body, like conventions and also policies. So this is through the programs and also international organizations. So we work with lots of diversity of the international communities. Here in the right side, we can see this is 8 SDGs are the main focus that we are now doing with the Cast Earth. So here we can see in DBAR in numbers, we include 4 continentals and 8 SDGs, and the plan is for 10 years. And we have 9 working groups, 57 partners and 8 ICOEs. So Thailand is one of us, and Helsinki, Russia, and also even the United States and Italy and Pakistan. So we have a regional center on that. So all of those link with one biggest data platform. So here's our DBAR ICOE, and most of them were set up from 2018 to 2019. So actually, I work in a cold area, but not the hot area like our Bangkok, Thailand. So here's the DBAR working groups. So from here, I can see we can quite much link with the DBAR agriculture or DBAR data, DBAR coast, and also the water, hydrogen and disaster. So and even the both urban. So this is the quite complicated and not complicated. It's quite a combination of all of those to work with the talent part. So the facility in Beijing, you can see it's very, yes, we have actually at this moment, it's not easy for us to visit in Beijing, but now in Beijing, we already set up this vision of the biggest data visualization and a decision making platform. And also we, in the Highland region of the Beijing, we have the biggest data infrastructures for supercomputing and also the data storage. So here's the Earth cloud capabilities. So you can see the supercomputing, storage, capacity, and data analysis process. And also we have the cloud service capability. So that will say, even from the Bangkok, we can set up the online cloud systems, cloud computers to use those data to work on that. But I not let me see how to expand more, because this is we just finished the first phase of the evaluation work of the DBAR. So here's the DBAR big data systems. So this is one of the English version. So that is a very good one. You can connect with online facility. So that is we work with scientists and the decision makers, and also open for the public users. So this is supported by the CAS-EARTH. This is one of the project. So later I will show that. So here is industry of interesting. At this moment, we developed 6 of them, and support goes in 3 major ways. One of the biggest data filling the gaps of the data, missing data. And the second is to create new methodologies. That is, we can create the SDG tools. That toolkits can help the people to use it and also to get the data to process on that. And as 3 is developing practice. That is to say, we have lots of factor sheets we can adjust in the regional level. So this is our DBAR 5 priority areas. So in 2018, we Professor Gore published a Nature commentary work, and this is this has lots of influence, like cited by lots of Nature work and even the science publication on that. So it's a foundation of that. So in this publication, we mentioned that we need to enhance the infrastructures and promoting the data sharing and interoperabilities. The third is to extend application to more people. Fourth, it's about the identifying research opportunities. So the fifth is to strengthen the international collaborations. So this is the 5 priority areas that we are now working on. So here, this is a map, one of the cases for the SDGs. So in different level, one is a global level, the second is a regional level, and the third is a national cases. And also we still work on the, for example, the countries, like local cases. So from here, you can see lots of the targets. We use a different colors to with the box to indicate which one is, at this page. Now we are work with a different level of the evaluation work. So I will show you some example. This is a monitoring and assess urbanization progress in the Belt and Road region. So from here, we can see different countries, the land consumption was faster than before, and lots of many cities are expanded very fast, and more and more cities in different regions. So here's we can see the expand of the urban spaces. The major challenge. This is one of the major challenges of sustainability, because the population is increasing, and also the energy consumption is increasing, and lots of the social and environment issues will come up, and we need to deal with a bigger data. So this is the biggest data flow global land degradation assessment. But happy to see that lots of places become greener. So that to say we can see with the development of climate change, and we also can assessment the change of the land surface. So this is one of the good example to show that not all the things are bad, but some of them are become better. For many years, actually for 2 years, at least this year, the 30 years, we have lots of biggest data document to, submit to the UN General Assembly. So this is, for example, one of those two is biggest data for the globally, and one of the biggest data for the bad and low.
Science and technology are an important. Science and technology.
I'm not sure if you can hear.
Technology are an important driving force.
Yes, we are hearing the sound.
You can hear?
It's broken, but we can hear it.
Implementation
Okay.
of the 2030 Agenda. China has used the big data, cloud computing, artificial intelligence,
This is one of the demonstrations.
and space technology to analyze and assess the progress in the achievement of the SDGs. Building on its work in 2019, the Chinese Academy of Sciences has compiled the 2020 report, A Big Earth Data in support of the Sustainable Development Goals, to provide supporting data for monitoring and evaluating the implementation of the 2030 Agenda under SDGs, covering zero hunger, clean water and sanitation, sustainable cities and communities, climate action, life below water, and life on land. Science and tech.
Yes, this is the video shows, and also we established the SDG website. This is the CASERS, integrated data sharing, SDG indicators, online processing toolkits, and also the visualization work. So this is one of the snapshot for that website. And because in that 75 UN General Assembly, China, President Xi Jinping said China will set up an international research center of the biggest data for SDGs. Actually, just in this month, we formally established this one in Beijing. This is the CBUS. So the name is CBUS. It's Integrated Research Center of the Biggest Data. So this is the task of those CBUS. So include developing SDG data infrastructure and information products, provide new knowledge for SDG monitoring and evaluations, develop and launch a series SDG satellite. So next month we will launch the first satellite to support the SDG data collecting. And the fourth is about the think tank. We would like to build up a think tank. And the fifth is included capacity building. That is, for example, in developed countries, we created a training and also the data outreach, data, freely downloading and also apply to the applications. So this is our aim for that. So along that, Professor Monsip is one of the deputy director for CBUS. So that is very good we work with the Thailand and also the whole region there about the SDGs. This is October to be launched this October. So about the satellite data, all of the data will be freely downloaded through the CBUS data portal, I think. Here, yes, let's see how to achieve the SDGs with the key of the big data. We would like to work with the international level and the international stakeholders, so even the international agencies, to facilitating the big data tools, data, and even applications to support the regional, local, or even national and a global level SDG work. So this is my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yubao. Very interesting presentation. So we saw from the two presentations that we have a long way to go to make the full use of big data for sustainable development. But as we saw from the presentation by Dr. Yuba, a very specific case of use of big data, and also a few good examples from Irina's presentation. The future is bright, and there's lots of good practices which we can build on to utilize existing data and produce new data sources for monitoring our progress towards the SDGs. Thank you very much. Please use the chat room and have exchange with Dr. Yubao and Irina on their presentation. There was already a question whether the presentations will be shared. I think Dr. Mondip's team will respond to that. So thanks again for your participation, and thanks very much, both of you, our presenters today. Over to you, Dr. Mondip.
Thank you very much, Mr. Aman Bidabakmia from Statistics Division of the UNSCAP for our moderator in this session 2. Now I move to session 3. Session 3 is on the topic restoring a green planet in time of red alert. I have the pleasure to call on Dr. Mushtaq Mimon, Regional Director, Resource Efficiency of the United Nations Environment Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific, to serve as moderator for this session. Dr. Mushtaq, please.
Thank you, Dr. Montep. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. And as we are now heading to the third session, that's restoring a green planet in the time of red alert. So how we can talk about the green recovery and building back better. So for this, we have 3 distinguished panelists and speakers. And I would like to request all of them that if they can please limit their presentation less than 15 minutes, so then few minutes we can have for interactive discussion as well. So at that note, let me first invite Dr. Achanis Kirta Sudhatha Shiva. She's Deputy Director of Stockholm Environment Institute, Asia. So Dr. Achanis, floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much for the chair. So could you see my slides now? Do you see my slide?
Yeah, if you can view, yeah, okay.
Okay, so that's great. So let me try to kind of talk about the ACI work in 15 minutes, as the chairs already mentioned. So here, this is the work that ACI, Stockholm Environment Institute, has been doing over the past 30 years. And this is some things that we like to work with many stakeholders in bridging science, policy, and practice. So for sustainable development around the world. So in these presentations, I just want to highlight that the work that we are now working on are many. So, but the one I want to emphasize most are the one that we work in partnership with many organizations around the world, especially for Thailand and also in the Mekong countries. SDGs is our international research and policy organizations. We are established as an organization since 1989, and we trying to deliver the research, working on the research and build the capacities of the stakeholders that we work in the developing world to use the research and the knowledge to inform policy for sustainable development. Our vision is to how we can use some kind of evidence-based and knowledge to inform policy and to achieve sustainable, prosperous futures for all. So this is our main aim. So sustainable development is our long-term goal of the organizations, even before 2015 of the SDGs, I mean, Agenda of 2030. So we already focused this since over 30 years back. What we're trying to focus now, considering 17 goals of SDGs here, to understand what are the capacities and the knowledge and experience and expertise we have, And we identified 3 areas that we are actually contributing to reduce climate risk, sustainable resource use, resilient ecosystems, and also we work on how to improve the human health and well-being. When it comes to the human health, we looking also in terms of the health of environment and ecosystems as well. SDI has been established after 30 years. We have now 10 offices around the world, including 8 centers. For Asia centers, we have the office based in Bangkok. Here we are hosted at Chulalongkorn Universities. So if you visit Chulalongkorn University, please feel free to visit us. We are a part of the Faculty of Political Science. So this is the building of our office. So the work in the past 30 years of SDI focus very much on people-centered and participatory approach. We work on environmental dimensions of human health, well-being, and also trying to integrate poverty, gender, social equalities into account while we conduct research and do the policy engagement. So here is to show how SDI work are aligned with 5 pillars of Agenda 2030. According to like here, each pillar have people, prosperity, peace, partnership, and planet. So we have actually worked on this using the research and the project implementations, where we work on this. We have food systems, agriculture, and also their work on air pollution and circular economy and energy. And we also work on water resources management, climate change adaptations, and also disaster risk reductions. And not to forget anyone, so we have to address the issue of social inequalities, gender inequalities. That's why we have worked on women, environmental, human rights defenders, genders, and migrations, for example, and even including the issue related to non-normative gender and sexualities. So we work with many partners, including the private sectors. So looking at the work that we do here, so I'd like to highlight the work in the Mekong region. So firstly, let me show you the work that I'm involved heavily on, so-called Sustainable Mekong Research Network. This research network have the work on how to actually engage with researchers in the Mekong and also other stakeholders to inform the policy by working together in the research and really understanding what are the causes of the challenges and what might be the joint solutions that people can engage with. So SUMMIT has been existed more than 16 years now, and current phase of the SUMMIT focus on reducing water insecurities for all, particularly for the poor and marginalized and socially vulnerable group of women and people. At the moment, the network expands to include 350 network members engaging in various activities of the network. And we actually have a lot of people working in here, including university research organizations, NGO, governmental organizations, and international agencies, private sector. So over the past 15 years here, we are supporting with many researchers. And here just to show you the examples of the project we are supporting. In this show the location map of the 23 projects that we are supporting across 5 or 6 countries in the Mekong, including 43 country teams, 159 grantees. And many of them are from Thailand, like 37 grantees are from Thailand. And many projects we actually not only provide funding support, but also technical support on, for example, how to recover the wetland, how to conserve their ecosystem services and biodiversity to really help address the issue of drought, flood, and also transboundary waters issues in the region. The second project I like to highlight is the work Underwater Beyond Boundary. This project is to help policymakers that they need to face with multiple challenges, including uncertain change with the climate, and also to ensure how they can manage and also supply water, enough water in terms of quantity and quality to different users. So Water Beyond Boundary introduced new ways of thinking and how to manage water's planning and also address those challenges. To give you some practical examples, it's not only like the research project, but in fact, we engage with many countries, including Thailand. For Thailand, we are helping the implementations and also preparations of the new provincial plan for Nakhon Phanom province in Songkhram River Basin of Thailand. By engaging with the local government and provincial government, National Resources and Environmental Office in the province to understand their needs, and also using the technical support, the tools, the modeling tools, the data to understand the interactions between water resources, environment, and people there. And here, just to show you some simple ecological relationships between the basin, the lower Nam Songkhram floodplain wetlands, and also upstream of the Mekong River, for example. So how is this the interaction and how we engage with people to identify the joint solutions in addressing the issues on this. And moving on to other projects. So I'd like to highlight some of the work that SDGs has been engaging with ASEAN's member countries and also ASEAN Secretariat. Thailand has taken a key role in ASEAN Climate Resilience Network, driving its establishment by initiating a project on promotion of climate resilience in rice and other crops in 2014. And actually Thailand also serving as the chair of the network. And over the past 2 years, SDGs has been supporting GIZ's engagement in ASEAN Climate Resilience Network and also ASEAN Negotiator Group on Agriculture by providing research synthesis and assisting also the capacity building workshop and providing support to ASEAN Negotiators Group on Agriculture. Recently, we published the Insights Brief series aimed to raise awareness of mitigation and also adaptation potential of the selected climate change use and practices, and to see what are the potentials for the member states can apply this, and what are kind of advantage and what are disadvantage for different kind of techniques. And we also help engaging with ASEAN Climate Resilience Network, synthesizing the literatures on climate smart land use, and also reviewing ASEAN land use guidelines and try to understand how this kind of guidelines has been used by regional government or national government and even the donors, for example, and to see what are the possible ways to promote the better use or more use of the guidelines into practice. So we also support various activities for ASEAN to engage with UNFCCC, especially in the climate negotiations. Yeah. The last project I like to highlight is a project governing bioeconomy pathway. So this is our SCI initiative on how to help better articulate the alternative pathway for bioeconomy development. So looking at the policy, institutions, and also governance mechanisms that can facilitate each of them on doing this. So for Thailand in particular, we look at the value chain of sugarcane and also are trying to help understanding what are the current national and sectoral policy documents from different organizations that outline Thailand's visions. For example, the bioeconomy, looking at sufficiency economy philosophies, 12 national economic social development plan that identify the income inequalities and also access to justice. And of course, Thailand 4.0 policy also included. And in terms of the research findings, we really see that it's very important that achieving the equity and environmental goals of bioeconomy will need more extensive engagement of diverse actors to ensure that they actually have common understanding and also perception on equity and sustainability on further development their own business and their own activities towards more sustainable bioeconomy. So this is something we see that we can enhance to the corporations, especially the work with the partners in Thailand. SCI has been known as an organization that develops various decision support tools to support decision makers, especially via non-profit organizations. Almost all of the tools for us that we developed over the past 30 years provided to for the profit purpose for free. In this occasion, I just want to highlight two tools related to SDGs for the participants to consider. The first tools, SDG Synergies. So this is a tools where SCI just recently launched. This is SDG Synergies website. And actually this is a website that is designed to be used by decision maker and those who need to support strategic decisions that involve multiple interacting targets and interests. And we know that sometimes we're trying to achieve this target and the goal, in fact, it could actually make another target and goal compromise and hard to achieve. So using these tools and the way to engage with the stakeholders really help to identify what might be appropriate or feasible balance or trade-off among different tools, the goals and targets that we would like to achieve considering limited resources available. And today, this tool has been used by many governments, regional level and also national level, and also for academic purpose, including, for example, Colombia, Mongolia, and also it has been used with many sectors. And EU environment targets and SDG progressing reporting also use these tools. And we are very keen to see how Thailand, for example, might be interested in using this tool. We can discuss on this further. The last tool I'd like to highlight is so-called NDC's SDG connections. This is a tool to help visualize the potential synergies between SDG and also countries' climate actions. In fact, recently we have done some analysis and also understandings what are different countries actually put in place their intentions under the NDC about their climate actions. So in this brief, it includes 7,000 climate activities for 64 NDCs under the Paris Agreement. And what we found here is that for climate actions in Thailand, we found many focus on energy, agriculture, life on land, related goals, for example, but very limited on reduced equality and gender equalities. So this is some things we can have further discussions, and if any colleagues and partners or organizations would have interest to learn more about the tools or cooperate with us in applying the tools for your context. So SCI maintain our commitment to bridge science and policies towards more environmental sustainabilities and inclusive development, and we very much welcome any opportunities to cooperate with you in the future. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Chanis. You covered well subnational, national, and even the regional projects. So now, without further ado, let's move from SCI to the Iucn. So I'm honored to invite Dr. Dindo Kamplan. He's Regional Director for Asia and Hub Director for Oceania from the International Union for Conservation of Nature, which is known as Iucn. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Miman, and good afternoon, everybody. And greetings from Iucn. I'm glad to be able to join you today and speak about nature positive sustainable development. And I will cover 3 key points. One is to describe our own program agenda in relation to SDGs, in what unique ways we are supporting the actions towards SDGs achievement, and a few examples of how we are partnering in Thailand for the SDGs. As an organization that's devoted to nature conservation and environmental protection, we are obviously working more directly and contributing to the SDGs that relate most closely to the environment. So that's 11, 13, 14, and 15. But we use that as a platform by which we contribute to the rest of the SDGs for more sustainable, resilient, and progressive human ecosystems. We are also guided in our agenda by what we call the Iucn Congress resolutions. So as a union, our governance, as well as a programmatic agenda, is defined by the membership that comprise the Iucn. I've shown a few of the examples here that connect to SDGs. Our current program agenda is unique in a way that it has a decade-long time frame of 2021-2030. Despite that, as Iucn, we have a 4-year statutory cycle for programmatic planning and implementation. And the reason for that is we want to connect with the broader development world and development cycle, including the targets that are in 2030, the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, and the Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. Now, obviously, because of the mission and the role of Iucn, our contribution to the SDGs build on the strengths of Iucn, the Secretariat, and also of our membership. And so if we look at the 4 environment-related SDGs, you will see there that our stated contribution is in the areas of species assessment, mitigating extinction rate risks, also in the area of biodiversity and productivity, and increasingly around nature-based solutions and ecosystem restoration. Now, how unique is Iucn's contribution to the SDGs? It comes from the fact that Iucn is a union as an institutional entity. What does that mean? We are intergovernmental, but we are also multi-constituency. At the moment, we have 91 state members. Last week, we had the good news from Maldives of the parliament approving their own state membership. Thailand has been one of the earliest state members of the Iucn, and we're proud of that. But in addition, we have government ministries, agencies, national NGOs, indigenous peoples organizations, and soon also subnational local governments like cities and municipalities joining us. So for us, when we seek, for example, of indigenous peoples, they're not just a program agenda for Iucn. They are the constituency. They are part of our governance. And they sit around the table and determine and guide, as well as assess the implementation of the work of the Secretariat. The other part of Iucn is, of course, this set of global commissions that we have. And probably a few of you in the room today are members of these commissions. There are over 15,000 of the world's leading experts in these commissions that relate to either species survival, down to environmental law, ecosystem management. And in the recent Congress that we just had 2 weeks ago, a new commission is going to be set up that will look exclusively on the relationship of NBS, nature-based solutions, and climate change. The other unique aspect of what we do is the fact that as a union, we have the statutory mandate to serve our state members. And while we have a regional hub here in Bangkok right now, from here, we reach out to 14 countries in Asia and Oceania to our 16 offices, from Suva in Fiji all the way down to Islamabad in Pakistan. And so we have a strategic location in Bangkok to be able to promote learning and exchange among the 48 countries that we serve from out of this regional hub. How we support SDGs, it's basically in 2 ways, and that relates to our function as Iucn, our convening role and our enabling role. Our most important roles around convening relate to our assigned and designated role as a technical advisor and partner to several environmental conventions and agreements. The World Heritage Site is probably the most relevant to speak of, given the recent inscription of one of the sites here in Thailand, where we serve as the technical advisor and assessor together with UNESCO. We play host to Ramsar for wetlands, and then also for CITES on wildlife trade. The union's voice is very important because this is what we bring to all the international dialogues, negotiations, and COPs around CBDs, for climate change, on desertification, and even for the Convention on Migratory Species. So as one collective union of over 1,400 members, we have this strategic voice to come to these platforms through the various resolutions that are issued by the entire assembly. We also facilitate platforms for regional dialogues and partnerships. And just giving two examples on our BRIDGE program on building river dialogue and governance, and for Asia Protected Areas Partnership. And our enabling role covers three sub-tasks. One is around resourcing, to be able to deliver, to be able to contribute to the SDGs. We believe that our members and partners need to be assisted in terms of the resources through our own grant schemes. And two examples is for the Critical Ecosystems Partnership Fund, and Mike, which is for the elephants. And this is on top of Iucn being an accredited entity for GCF, and also as an implementing executing agency for GEF. We are known primarily for our decision support tools and global standards and indexes, coming from our work as a science-based, science-driven organization. Three examples around Rome, on FLR, and more recently, and this is becoming more popular, on the guidelines for private sector engagement, given the sensitivities around partnerships with the business sector in promoting biodiversity and nature conservation. Our standards and indexes are what define us as an institution over all these decades. We're known, of course, for Red List as the major index indicator of the world's biodiversity and the threats to species extinction. There's a green list, and the green list is not about the species. This is about areas, protected and conserved areas. And of course, there's NBS. Now, these days, a lot of organizations, including private sector, talk about NBS, and there's a threat to its being overused or misused. So Iucn now sets a standard for the NBS. We have an Iucn Academy that also provides capacity building to ensure there is harmonization, consistency in the application of NBS standards across sectors. Coming to Thailand, three examples I'd like to share today is our work with the private sector in the marine and coastal ecosystems and in the wetlands. Our unique advantage being in Thailand is, again, as Iucn, we have 11 of our members, and we have a national committee. And this is led by our state member to the Ministry of Environment and represented by a DNP, Department of National Parks, Wildlife and Plant Conservation, and a cross-section of the different organizations ranging from local NGOs to RECAFTC as a regional international organization. This is the committee that informs and guides and advises our Thailand national program. One example is as the biodiversity business and biodiversity platform. This is Thailand's first and only platform consisting of the major companies operating in the country and enabling them and supporting them as they design the programs and business operations to contribute to SDGs and the Aichi biodiversity targets. As part of the BDNA, for example, the network has developed this online training course intended for companies and the private sector to be able to understand what the SDGs mean and how they, as actors from the private sector, could contribute towards the achievement. In Rayong, which is another example on with BDNA around mangrove restoration. And what is interesting in these examples is how we are connecting our contributions to the environment-related SDGs towards the rest. And in this case, it's SDG 4 around education. The mangrove restoration initiative that we have provides a good example of yet another partnership. This time with DAO. And then we have for the Mekong Wet project, which is around the wetlands. This brings together the SDGs 13 to 15, but also 4, as we mobilize networks of universities and students in contributing to the SDGs. And I would like to close by recognizing that Thailand has been a very important state member and partner of the Iucn. You see, we have our Congress, a World Conservation Congress, every 4 years as a governance and assembly. 2004 was hosted by Thailand, and we thank, in fact, Dr. Monty and the rest have been responsible for organizing. At the time, it was the biggest event in the world of over representatives from over 160 countries. And for that, there were over 100 resolutions that came out of that Congress. We had our most recent Congress just 2 weeks ago in Montpellier in France. And we were again thankful that we had representations across Asia, including from Thailand. Now, moving forward, the big question is, what is the opportunity and need for Iucn? Given our primary focus on SDGs relating to the environment, we are looking for opportunities that enable us to reach out and connect the dots, especially with organizations that work on the rest of the SDGs, so that collectively we'd be able to say that we have created synergies towards SDGs achievement in 2030. Thank you and good afternoon.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dino Kaplan, for a very elaborative way of putting the enabling role and also the convening role for Iucn to showcase how to work with the different stakeholders, including the civil society, private sector, and government. So now let's move from Iucn to IGS. IGS, as I used to be in IGS, where Dr. Monte used to be on the board, and I have a friend now, she's coming here for the presentation. So let me invite Ms. Wei-Chin Teo, whom we know as Shom. Shom, over to you, please. You are muted, Shom. You are muted. Shom. You're muted.
Okay.
Okay, good.
Hello, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I think you can hear me now. Just now, I was muted by the host. So thank you very much for the introduction by Dr. Mushtaq. And as you know well, IGS is very active in this Asia Pacific region, and we have many initiatives related to the SDGs. But for today in particular, we would like to share with you an initiative which is related to the localizing of SDGs in the ASEAN region. Let me open my slides. Okay, now I believe you can see my slides. So today we would like to share with you the activities from ASEAN SDGs Frontrunner Cities program. This is a program which we started about 10 years ago in partnership with the ASEAN Secretariat. And at that time, we noted that there is an abundance of policies and strategies and tools, but comparatively speaking, there's very little support given to implementation on the ground, which is equally, if not more important, I would argue. So that's why we started this regional cities platform, which initially was called Model Cities. And this platform basically provides support to the aspiring green cities in the ASEAN region to implement bottom-up and innovative actions to realize green, clean, low carbon, and beautiful ASEAN. So it's very much focused on the environmental dimension of the challenges. So far, over 10 years, we have directly supported 56 cities in 8 ASEAN member states. And as you can see from here, Thailand is the biggest component of this regional program. And all the cities have been really outstanding and showcasing very, very excellent practices. And this is thanks to the strong support also by our partners at the national level. We partner with the Department of Environmental Quality Promotion, DEQP, as well as ONEP, the Office for Policy and Environment and Natural Resources, to select the highly and high performance and highly awarded cities at the national level to participate in this program so that they can elevate their ambitions. And not only that, they can serve as mentors and inspiration to other cities in this region. So this is just to show you that for the last phase, which we just completed, the 4th phase, we have redesigned and upgraded the framework of the program to be aligned with the SDGs. So that means that we are really actively encouraging the cities not to look at the environmental dimensions, but also the social and economic issues which are related. So that's in line with the integrated framework of the SDGs. Okay, so what do we do under this program? Under this program, firstly, we support the organizing of the national SDGs workshops at least 2 times over 2 years in respective countries. And for these national workshops, we tap into the existing Green Cities network at the national level, so that we not only engage the cities in our program, but also all the cities that are recognized by each national government as frontrunners. And then in this program, we introduced all the cities, and last phase we had 24 cities. We introduced them to the SDGs, since most of them, actually they have mostly they expect that the national policies will reflect the SDGs and then it will trickle down to their level. But in this case, we encourage them to be proactive and look at the SDGs and see how it can connect with their local priorities and challenges. And they each implement pilot activities on the ground and then capture their output and their knowledge into reports. And we also hold the regional workshops to connect all of them so that they can exchange knowledge, experience, and inspire each other. So our projects not only want to help them improve the local quality of life in the cities, but also let them have a sense of solidarity, that they are not only doing things for the local level, but also contributing to the global issues. Okay, so this is one good example of the cities which recognize the value of the SDGs. So Shah Alam City from Malaysia, they used the project report which was produced, and then they further went on to develop the local roadmap for the SDGs, which is called the voluntary local review. And this mechanism is actually recognized by the UN, and they presented their voluntary local review to the UN high-level forum on the SDGs just last July. So reports are very important, but I think we are all more interested also with the ground and actual results. So this diagram just shows you, because of time limits, cannot show you what every city is doing, but in general, all of the cities here, they're just trying to address the problem of pollution and degradation of the ecosystems caused by the urban problems, especially from waste. So most of the waste in the cities go into landfill or into the water bodies. And this is causing the most serious problem of climate change and the global plastics crisis. So this is another illustration just to show you what all of the cities in our network are trying to implement. And basically, as I mentioned, so the most important activities and starting point for all the cities is that waste management is the priority, because it's highly visible and it's really under the control of the local government. So if we can promote the systems where we separate the waste and turn them into local resources, which then results in the strengthened resiliency of the local community, then we can say that the cities contribute to the SDGs. I think, so it's not just about the environment, because you see that we place the dollar signs here. So all of the activities should be structured so that they also generate income and economic benefits like jobs for the local people who participate. And of course, what is not shown here, which is, I think, already highlighted by all of the other presenters, the most important thing is to engage the local people and let them understand and cooperate. And through all of these activities, which started just from waste management, they built the social capital and the know-how and the expertise in environmental issues. So most of the cities, right, once they have done a good job, let's say, at waste separation and creating the local waste diversion centers. Then they start to explore other issues like wastewater treatment, and some of them even started the small scale solar in their multi-purpose residency center. So these centers actually is not new, it's not newly constructed, it's just adapting from the local homes, the government office, the public parks, the schools, the beach, and the riverside. So there's no time, Mushtaq, so I don't show any real photos. If we have time, I can show later after. So this is the conclusion from my presentation. So I'd like to answer 3 questions. One, what are the benefits of SDGs to cities? So from my observation, SDGs, they are very helpful as a very like a comprehensive checklist for the cities to ensure that they have covered all aspects of sustainable urban development. And for example, just now one speaker said that I think the gender goal, it was not really well addressed or paid special attention. And this is what we noticed too. So in our project, for example, we really integrated that. We make it not compulsory, but we reminded them that in this project team, you have to have a gender balance. So this is a very practical way for them to move forward in addressing all of the SDGs. And another point is the integrated versus prioritizing approach. So most of the cities, they, by their nature, institutional nature, they tend to prioritize because they have very limited resources. But I think there's much more further work for international organizations and us to support them to pursue what we call the integrated approach. And then what are the challenges and opportunities that we observe? So as I mentioned earlier, actually Thai cities, right, they have really, really outstanding practices and pilot projects. But the problem is they have a weaker language proficiency. So they are not so good at capturing their, they cannot explain the story behind their projects. So even though they have done outstanding work, we need to support them to really frame their issues and their achievements in a very easy to understand way. So this is one comment I have. And also a lot of, I think this is common. So we find it very difficult to establish the baseline conditions in each city. And this is due to the weak local data management capacity. But I have a firm belief that over time, we can pursue the big technologies and big data that we have learned from the first session to overcome these challenges. And then finally, the way forward, we as IGES, we really appreciate and we really understand how difficult it is for these frontrunner cities to do whatever they're doing now. We have to understand that what they're doing is voluntary. So it's not backed up by the strong legislation. So it is understandable that they cannot scale up. So we hope that eventually these cities will be like a reference or focal points for the national legislation or policy, which we surely will introduce because we are already in the code rate situation. So looking forward, IGES, and we hope to work with all of the other organizations. We want to transfer latest knowledge and ideas, and then we want to facilitate the mutual benchmarking and learning, and we want to continue capturing the good examples, real examples that people can easily understand so that we can spread the knowledge and practice for the tipping point creation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shom. As Shom has championed the sustainable cities very well, and especially looking on the waste management, circular economy, and more important, SDGs and cities. So now we have 6 minutes or 5 minutes, and I don't see any chat questions. So I will take now liberty to put one question to all of the distinguished speakers. So our title says restoring a green planet in time of red alert. Let's revert this to the restoring a green Thailand in the time of pandemic. If we put this question on the top, then SEI, like research-based support for the Thailand, how we can make the Thailand greener in the times of this pandemic. Iucn with all the enabling and convening powers and working with multi-stakeholders, how can you see that we can turn the Thailand green during pandemic? and for Shom, the Thai cities are their home. And all of you as live in Thailand, I mean, the offices are in Thailand, so you know well Thailand. So over to now, I go with the same sequence. So first, Dr. Chanis, and then Dr. Dindo, and then Shom. So Dr. Chanis, for you, the question.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mustak. So this is not easy questions, but I would say, in fact, during the time of the COVID, we actually, by products, it's already, how to say, a lot of things related to environment now recovering, even to a certain extent, it's not really by really strong intention at the beginning. For example, we now travel less, for example, and we use less kind of energies traveling, so to this or that. So what I think we better think now is that even after the COVID, how can we remember, how can we see or how to say, appreciate the situation now with a lot of things clearer. So we have more trees, people even starting from ourselves. So I think more and more people now growing and do more gardening at home because we spend a lot of time doing this. And how can we make sure that for the moment that we are working from home, staying from home with the family and seeing that what we can do by ourselves here will continue and remain our practice and thinking beyond ourselves, but also for communities for the work that we are now doing. So I really think that there's a lot of things we can learn during this period, and we should continue our learning and also working together. So when we have chance to really connect physically, we should really brainstorm among ourselves here, where here now we connect more virtually, but how can we work together with all these good initiatives and really at the moment that we can do actions in the field together. I really looking forward to that. So thank you very much.
Thank you. So over to Dr. Dindo. Also, how to make the Thailand green during pandemic from IUCN point of view, sir? So you're muted, sir. You're muted. Okay. Again, muted, sir. Okay.
There is a risk among us, international national organizations, to be too focused on our respective mandates that in the end, this become blinders for us. And that we as IUCN recognize that. I'm speaking about conservation and nature conservation. That's our business and that's our day-to-day lives. But we seem to forget that the wider world is concerned more than just conservation. So we now use 4 Cs. Our nature conservation work is framed around the 4 Cs. We know conservation remains important now into the future, but we must also be aware and to put it in context with other 3 Cs. And the second C is, of course, COVID and how it is restricting operations, both as IUCN, but also our partners in the government. The third C, of course, is climate. Everybody talks about the impact of climate. And the fourth is conflict within and beyond the borders of Thailand and around the region. So these 4 Cs have influenced the way we shape and also we implement the programs that we have. One of the important solutions that we're offering in the context of COVID and helping Thailand become greener is around nature-based recovery. As we try to connect the issues and the challenges in the human and the social side with nature. And so we're talking these days about zoonotic diseases and eco-health. This is where we position IUCN's contribution in providing not only nature-based solutions, but nature-based recovery solutions to pandemic and other similar crises.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. So now over to Shom, green cities in Thailand during pandemic.
Difficult question, but I think I share similar views with Dr. Chayanis. And I think actually COVID is, depending on how we look at it, it's a blessing in disguise, right? And we are like the privileged group here in this workshop. We are the top maybe 10% of society. So we need to actually show the example of how we can transform our practice and our culture to be more sustainable more green, but of course, we don't expect that we can change everything overnight. I think the most important thing is that everyone, in whatever capacity they are, if you're a policymaker or whoever, you're a community member, you have to just keep challenging yourself to do more than what we did before COVID. And actually, like Dr. Chani said, we already surveyed our cities members, right? And then they actually told us that, oh, they realized that the local people, the average persons who never cared about the food security, never cared about water issues, because they were too busy in their normal life, right? They already know the importance of sufficiency. Let's say urban gardens is already booming in many of our cities, and it already changed the mindset and culture of the average person. So I think we are on the right track, but we must be brave to speak out and do something really different. We cannot just continue as we did before COVID. And I speak very strongly also on behalf of the younger generation, because personally, I am worried. The UN says that we have 10 years left, supposedly, right? That means all of us actually in this workshop, we will still be alive. We will be still alive. And if we don't do our part to change the culture and mindset and sharing information to everyone and changing policy, then I don't know. I don't know what will happen. So
thank you. No, so is a UN decade of action for especially like a youth you mentioned. So thank you very much. I think all the three distinguished speakers, so big hand for all of you. And back to Montip. Dr. Montip, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mushtaq Mimon, for being our moderator. So now we will continue our session 4. This session 4, the topic is localization of the global goals in the post-COVID era. The session will be moderated by Professor Mario Tabukanan, United Nations University's Institute for the Advanced Study of Sustainability. Professor Mario, please.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. I am honored to serve as a moderator for this very important session, that's session 4, on localization of the global goals in the post-COVID era. We are very fortunate to have 3 distinguished speakers from the United Nations Development Program, UNDP, the Rakstai Foundation, or CARE International in Thailand, and the Asia Foundation. The speakers will share insights on their respective organizations' SDG localization policies, programs, approaches, methodologies, interventions, lessons learned. As announced earlier, if you have questions, you may post them in the chat room, and the speakers will respond accordingly during the course of the conference. Now, first, let us hear from Mr. Renaud Mayer, UNDP resident representative in Thailand, to speak first. And now I am honored to turn over the floor to Mr. Renaud Mayer. Renaud, please.
Thank you very much, Professor Tabukanan, for your introduction, and Sawadee Krap, very good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for inviting UNDP to join this session, and let me share my screen to proceed with the with my presentation. Can I just get a quick signal if you can see my slide? Yes, okay, wonderful. So as the professor has announced, this is information about how in UNDP Thailand we look at the SDG localization. And I would start by indicating that for us it's really a two-track approach. It's a process of really pushing the whole Agenda 2030 at the subnational level, and in a way empowering, but also holding accountable subnational entities. So in the case of Thailand, municipalities, tambons, provinces, of course, hold them accountable to take action, to align their work, their projects, their vision, their budgets on the SDGs, and thereby contribute, complement the work that is being done at national level. So facilitating this process is one of the main tasks of UNDP, and it is in complement to the second track, which is really about ensuring that through projects and interventions, we see the delivery of SDG related services at local levels. So when we work on climate action, there is some activities undertaken at local level. When we work on food security, when we work on education, on health, all the SDGs, we want to see clear operations taking place at local level. So it's really this two-track approach. But I would say the first one is probably where we see as UNDP as having a niche of really facilitating and creating platforms to support this localization process. So why is it so important? Well, first and foremost, because it's going to be a unique way of reaching, to the individuals, to the citizens, and to the local communities by really almost incentivizing that the SDGs enter people's homes, right? They become part of their discussions, of their work, etc. But it's also, and this is important, when we localize, then we also are able to adapt to a local context, right? So obviously the development challenges that is faced by Chiang Rai compared to Trang, compared to Phuket, are going to be different. And if, of course, we expect them to deliver the whole of the agenda, the 17 goals as a package, if you wish, they will look at which of the goals are most relevant to them, speaks to them in terms of their priorities of development challenges, and identifying, homegrown local solutions out of consultations and discussions with local stakeholders. It complements, as I said earlier, the work that is done at national level. But we believe that there is only so much that the central government can do, and that's usually, linked to providing a conducive environment and really having operations and activities implemented at local level. And ultimately, and this is more of a long-term perspective, it's also a very efficient way of empowering citizens, right? And in a country like Thailand, which has a heritage of a fairly centralized way of governance, to, in a way, incentivize decentralization and push decentralization in a positive way of principle of subsidiarity obliged, to really expect local decisions that affect local communities. So a very good number of reasons why we see in pushing the localization in Thailand as the way to go. The roadmap that we are working with is of course inspired by the national roadmap, and you will recognize, I'm sure, things that have been discussed over the past years with NESDC and around capital development, human capital development. And here we'll work on the provision of social services, but also for UNDP, very importantly, how we can leverage, innovation and digital technologies to fast track a lot of the work that is being done at local level by local stakeholders. And the third one is going to be, in a way, the home of the famous LNOB, principle behind the SDGs, the leave no one behind. So here, a lot of emphasis on rights, on empowerment, on giving voice, and a strong focus on the vulnerable communities. Again, each region, each province has a different set of issues, and with different segments of the population that are sometimes left behind. So a really focus on this where we will want to work with people with disabilities, with the elderly, with ethnic minorities, with the LGBTQ community, where we really want to put the emphasis on those segments that unfortunately still are victim of some discrimination and need to be further pushed up. Right. So this, in a way, it brings you the what of the UNDP's approach. But I think very importantly, it's the concept of integrated development solutions at local level that I want to emphasize and to leave you with. And this parallel track of top-down and bottom-up approaches that we have now a full consensus between central government and especially municipalities around the country. So with this, Professor, I'll give you back the floor, and I'll look forward to a good discussion around this work, listen to my other peer speakers, and of course, cater to any questions in the chat that would come our way. Thank you very much, Kapungka. Professor, you're still muted. We don't hear you.
Where is Ron? Hello, can you hear me? Hello? Yes. Hello? Okay. Thank you very much again for sharing UNDP's two-track approach. It's a two-way traffic, top-down and bottom-up. And particularly the SDG localization pilots around Thailand is very interesting, which was approved by the Royal Thai government. So now let us move on. Next, let us hear from Mr. Prombon Panichpak, Executive Director of Rakstai Foundation for Care International Thailand, to hear from his insights on what the foundation is doing on SDGs. So may I now call on Mr. Prombon to have the floor, please.
Thank you, Professor Mario, and thank you to Dr. Montip for inviting Rakstai Foundation. I'm very pleased to be here, and greetings to my colleagues. So let me begin quickly with my screen sharing. Okay. So just one moment. Oops. Okay, so I hope you can all see my screen now.
You can see, yes.
Yes. We are Rakstai Foundation, and we're here as both a hybrid between a Thai and an international organization. And my subject here this afternoon is about empowering women, men, children, and communities within SDG framework. So let me explain a little bit. I will be talking about a little bit about Care International and Rakstai Foundation, what Rakstai Foundation is doing in Thailand, and finally about our suggestions about SDGs. So you'll see here that CARE is a confederation. We do not have a headquarters anywhere. CARE has members that are from, right now there's totally 14 members from 14 countries. And these are initially, after World War II, from the USA and then expanding to Europe and Canada, Australia, and now including members from developing countries. So that includes Thailand, Peru, India at the moment, and in the future, the candidates you'll see below, there's Indonesia, Sri Lanka, and many more to come. So we are proud of the fact that we are no longer just a Northern NGO. We are more linked to the places where we work. And here showing on the map where we work across the globe, Care International, you can see that it used to be north to south, and now it is more as working together, north and south. And this is what is happening. We hope that in the future, more and more members of CARE International will come from the Global South. Each member is an organization, a local NGO in their own entity in their countries, and we work together under a secretariat. The secretariat is like a coordinating body. This is from the CARE International vision, and you see at the center of that, it says contributing to SDGs. So there's no question that all of CARE's work around the world is trying to create impact towards SDGs. And we're very happy to see SDGs. CARE International is a very big advocate with other society organizations on climate change and about particularly another big issue that CARE is very interested in is in women's equality, gender equality, and also working together with partners in the developing countries. We have a three-level type of how we work on the right-hand side of this, working to build agencies, working with individuals to build, empower them to stand up and they can take action themselves, can have voices themselves. And that leads to changing relationships with their people in their same communities, in their same organizations, and eventually to transfer structures where we refer to policies, laws, and even norms that may be required to make change happen. Here is the 5 sectors where Rock Thai Foundation is operating on the last 24 years. We have women's empowerment, which is the core cross-cutting, just like CARE. Women's empowerment is the core of all of our programming. We also work with children and youth. And we here in Thailand, because youth are mostly at very high level education, we focus on leadership skills and working with youth leading the way, making decisions and different areas. Health, Thailand has a very high health standard, but there's some issues on the communicable diseases. Thailand is in the process, the Ministry of Health, of ending AIDS, TB, malaria, and we are a key player for society funded by Gold Fund in that program. I'll talk about it more later. Environment, with CARE International, we are addressing climate change and many areas of the natural resources and also agriculture that is friendly to environment. And finally, as many international NGOs are involved in humanitarian programming, responding to different emergencies. We can see how this is all related to SDGs. This is quite understood. One sector may be involved in many SDGs, but there's always an emphasis on different types of where each program puts its focus on, but they are all interrelated. Here in Thailand, particularly, the 5 sectors we are working, we can see that we are reaching people that really in the category of left behind. And some of them, we're not even sure how they can be included, but I think it's very important that everybody's included, no one left behind. So we're working with migrant workers in Thailand, a large part of Myanmar and Cambodia, working in the fisheries, seafood processing. This is one of our main programs in working in multiple provinces, and also with partners in the western borders along with Myanmar. So that is a big area. And with that comes, of course, the children of migrant families that are often, some can attend Thai schools, but a lot of them are still left out. Highland ethnic populations, this is more in the group of being Thai citizens, but also still marginalized because of the distance and different ethnic population types of ways of life. Another very interesting group we work with is people who inject drugs, where we work because in our harm reduction HIV, so this is a population that we see very important working with them. Together with men who have sex with men, transgender, we work with these people. This is not just delivering, but engaging them in empowerment and also them to be involved in program delivery. Of course, women in Deep South, that is one of the key areas we work. Small-scale farmers, and with children who work in schools, preschool and in school with different agencies in trying to build leadership, stop bullying, business skills, and even teen pregnancy. then the coastal populations, which is in the south of Thailand and also in anywhere where there becomes disaster emergencies will be operating. Here it shows the more geographic areas that different types of population we address in different areas of the country. You see on the map, there are these dots showing Raktai offices. We have 14 offices around the country, but we work in much more areas because we work with partners in different different provinces around the country. I'm dressed with some photos about some of the issues we deal with, like with the migrant population. We all know that we haven't talked about so much in these meetings on SDGs, but they are part of the Thai people living in Thailand, and that therefore should be included somehow in looking how we look at SDGs. But we have not children, some of them cannot attend schools. We have to do alternative schools. Children or infants born to mothers who are undocumented, these are things that we have to deal with. And in the time of COVID, our teams, because we work at the field, our program, we have staff who are actually from Myanmar and from Cambodia. So we are the link between the Thai public health and the migrant community, giving translation, these outreach programs, and all of this COVID in many provinces around, particularly as I mentioned, along the coastal areas, but also in some of the provinces along with Myanmar. And in Thailand, it's still hard to believe, but there are many communities where children have never possessed their own books. They're far out there, they've never seen books. So this is something that I think that when we talk about North Behind, that we have to recognize that we have to really go out there and find these communities. They are there, they're not hiding anywhere. We just have to address them politically. And with that growth of becoming mothers, this is still happening in Thailand. This is one of the ethnic population groups. This is something that is part of the norm and culture, but I think it changes when development reaches the community. The age of girls marrying increases. And of course, in the Deep South, it's not only about development, but it's also combined with the conflict going on in the South. So women, it's particularly difficult to come out, but we have to also this. And very importantly, is to address marketing skills, not only production skills. And here, with the Thai Drug Users Network, having their voice, having them talk about harm reduction, why it's important to have Thailand to have more favorable policy, helping people who are use of different drugs. It could be of some time in their life, but now they're addicted, they need help. And as I mentioned, empowering women is not just about giving funding and equipment, but it's also a lot of it's learning skills that will empower them to step beyond their traditional role. This is home financing. And marketing, as I mentioned, is very important. So we are reaching where we have to say, well, how do we scale up? And one thing we're finding in the current time is that digital can really make us do a lot more reach. Like here we say, women that have never seen how Facebook can be used as a market tool. And they're very interested in learning how they can start selling online. Here in the South, village health volunteers that are plotting the homes of elderly people in the communities in case of disasters. So they're now using technology themselves. And this one here in northern Thailand with other organizations working together, we are doing plotting of maps, digital maps using GIS, but this is done by community members. And they can use that in their working and talking with the district officers because their land is still considered to be government public land, forest reserve. But here's a very important tool where they can have their own space. And in the South, working with UNDP, actually UNDP is leading this in the biofuel, having sustainable financial mechanisms for biodiversity. And here's where we did something at the COVID time to help the seaboat taxi drivers and collect the collection of garbage on the coast. Interesting, most of it was plastic. And now we find that with the new technology that we can take samples around. This is Thai PBS. A lot of us know this. They can pick up samples for using the, we call it a people's report to postings happening around the country. So this is not, with the technology, people can benefit. This is learning about women learning on marketing through online training, and that's so my message. Listening to this, I've been listening to the last two workshops, and I think that we need to bring SDG to the earth. And that's how I mean bringing to the real communities. And I have 6 recommendations. That this is just very quick thinking. But I think we need to make the SDGs understood and friendly to everyone, and particularly marginalized groups, and very importantly to young people. This is extremely important. We need to that. In doing this, perhaps we need to allow the communities to develop their own indicators that align with the SDGs, and they can use this for planning and advocacy. Advocacy is still very important for these groups. We can do this by widespread of using new technologies, communicating the language of each population, engaging in the private sector, particularly those involved in communications and those involved in sustainable development and supply chain accountability, and also working with other civil society. I think civil society is a very important convener and organizer with these groups, and we have to very much avoid top-down approaches where we're just very highly technical discussions or going through a lot of bureaucracy to say this is what you must do or must understand. So we have to do that. Here's an example in Masuk, in Macham district, where we are the different organizations, but what the aim is to get the community to lead the way in making use of the GIS map to track in a sub-district what's happening, population issues on communicable diseases, different things they can track, local disasters, this they can track, and they can work with the local government to say how should they respond the best. And I think when we start communicating, it's very important that we don't have to keep SDGs in the conference room. We have to really come out there to meet young people. And here you can see that this is, excuse me. Okay, so we have to, the young people are out there, they want to communicate, they have the new technology. We have to reach them, we have to make them part of the SDG campaign. It shouldn't be just measuring at a high level, we have to reach them out and really engage them. This is about, their student and young people's campaigns. In Thailand, we need to do it in at least three languages, because we have people from neighboring countries in Thailand. Everything we message has to be in 3 countries. This is about gender-based violence that we're doing campaigns on. And we understanding now that we can really reach out very broadly with technology. This is an e-learning, e-training for schools around the country on anti-bullying that we're doing with the Ministry of Education. And here's another example, even the famous coach, who has recently been the coach of tennis to get the gold medal for Thailand, can do training online. So many things can be done nowadays if we use it. We have to scale up the understanding of SDGs so it is worldwide. So it is nationwide covering, so everybody understands what it means to them in their household. So in closing, this is showing that the board members of RACTAI, people some of you may know, but we're all very committed to pushing on the SDGs, and particularly the SDG 5, gender equality, and fighting to end gender inequality. Thank you very much.
The Foundation's vision on empowerment and rights-based approach, particularly of women and children and communities, and your strategy to SDG implementation that impact poverty alleviation and inequality, and also your message of bring SDG down to earth. Thank you very much. And now we move on to our last speaker in the session, last but not least, of course, let us hear from Mr. Thomas Parks, the Asia Foundation's country representative in Thailand, who will give us his insights on the foundation's activities, programs, projects here in Thailand. So Mr. Thomas Parks, may I pass on the floor to you, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you again for the opportunity to speak with you today. Can you see my slides that I'm presenting right now?
Yes, we can see.
Okay, great.
You might want to enlarge it.
How was that? Does that look okay? Okay, let me go ahead and jump in. Well, thank you again for this opportunity. And it's very hard to follow Renaud from UNDP and also Kun Prambon from Ket Raktai. Our organization, I think we are perhaps a little bit less active directly on the SDG implementation. We certainly don't have the same type of normative and sort of global leadership role that the UN has. And in addition, unlike CARE, we're an international organization, an international NGO, but we do, I think, a number of things that are relevant for the localization agenda. And so what I'm going to do today is talk very briefly about what we do, but I think about some lessons more generally about development cooperation in Thailand and how international agencies like ours can be helpful to the Thai government in localizing of the SDGs. Very, very briefly, we are, as I mentioned, a private international non-governmental organization. We've been operating in Thailand since 1954, and this was one of our very first offices when we were established at the time. US-based, specifically in San Francisco. Our mandate basically is to focus both on sustainable development, but as well on international relations. And so a lot of what we do is to look at the merger of those two important issues. And I'll get more to that shortly. Our funding is basically a combination of various governments. Our largest donor in Thailand actually is the Australian government. But in addition, we work closely with corporations and with various private foundations. I'd also like to talk, while I'm going to focus on localization, I also think it's important to think about this from a sub-regional perspective, particularly as we talk about Thailand and its important role in the Mekong subregion. And so our office here in Thailand also leads on various programs at the ASEAN, ACMEX, and Mekong subregion level. And I think of our organizational values, I think the most important one that I want to emphasize today is the first one there, which is deep respect for local context. I think you'll see as I talk about what we do, most of what we do is not trying to bring outside ideas to Thailand to try to solve problems, but really our belief is that the solutions to Thailand's challenges and it's the answer for accelerating progress towards the SDGs for Thailand is really local solutions and local expertise. And I'll speak to that more in a minute. Okay. The areas that we're working are basically, we have quite a bit that focuses on Thailand's middle income trap, which can largely translate to SDG 8 and SDG 4. And a lot of our work is to try to understand why Thailand its growth trajectory is slowing and what can be done to try to improve that. Much of it focused on education. In addition, we're focusing to a large extent on advanced technologies and how to unleash the potential of Thailand to use technology to advance a more sustainable type of growth. Inequality is an important focus of ours, and I'll talk in a minute about, we've have a number of programs in the Northeast, in the region of Iucn, and as well in the Deep South in years past. And it's important to understand the sort of local context, which obviously is critical to the localization agenda. Gender is a very important objective of ours. We're just starting a new program on trying to expand women's workforce participation, which we think is also crucial for middle income trap related challenges. The environment is an important regional initiative. Actually, we have a program called the Mekong Safeguards Program, which is working on infrastructure safeguards and trying to improve the future of infrastructure build out in this region. And as well, regional cooperation. A lot of what I spend my time on is trying to work at the regional level, particularly with ASEAN and ACMEX, to try to find ways of advancing SDG progress through those, supporting those entities to achieve SDGs. Okay. Now, I think it's important, our starting point for looking at what we can do in Thailand and how we can continue to be relevant is really to look at Thailand's unique context as an upper middle income country. In many ways, I think we have found that many of the traditional development assistance approaches often don't really work in Thailand. Thailand is a place where, the funding and the capacity of government are really not the key challenges. There are many challenges, but the traditional approaches of trying to provide finance and trying to do capacity building, among other things, don't tend to be as relevant in Thailand. And so what we tend to do is focus much more on problem solving and try to be much more opportunistic and responsive to local opportunities, basically drawing together and supporting Thai actors and Thai reformers as they try to address some of the acknowledged challenges. We work very closely with government in all of our areas in this way as well. Now, part of this as well is trying to understand that, there's been a lot in the past of bringing external best practice to Thailand, and that's reflected in a number of the challenges that Thailand faces now. And so a lot of our approach is really not to start with what works elsewhere, but really what works within Thailand. As I mentioned before, our assumption is that the solutions are within the country and within the expertise of government and Thai academics and experts, not necessarily externally. And importantly, also, we look at development critically as both a combination of diplomacy and development, really. We look at, for example, Thailand's important role in supporting and encouraging development in neighboring countries, we think is really important for the future of this region. And we try to work as much as we can with the Thai government and with other Thai reformers to lead that process, including in third countries. Okay, so the localization agenda, just to remind us all, is really about trying to take into account subnational contexts within the goals of the 2030 agenda. Thanks to UNESCAP and the SDG help desk for letting me draw on their definition here. Now, there's a couple of key parts of this, of course. SDGs partly as a framework for promoting local development policy, but as well trying to find ways of local and regional governments supporting achievements of SDGs through local action from the bottom up. And this is, I think, the one that I'm going to focus on primarily today. Okay. Now, within Thailand, as many of you know, each region has its own distinct challenges. And it's important to understand what those challenges are in order to find the ways of both addressing those challenges at the local level, but as well the possibility of trying to encourage locally modified or bespoke approaches which can have the most potential for success in each region. And so a lot of what we try to do is to understand what is unique about the Northeast, or what is unique about the Deep South, or Mae Hong Son province, for example, that would allow them to make progress on key issues. We know that Thailand has a highly centralized governance structure, but we've also found that there are lots of opportunities for local initiative and local leadership to try to push development forward in very, very positive ways. Renaud spoke to this to some extent in his presentation about what the UNDP is doing, but I think there's really a lot of opportunities for this. The central government, of course, plays a critical role of setting SDG targets and leading on the overall financing and policy regulatory environment. But I think the central government as well, various ministries, are finding more and more opportunities and thinking about how to unleash the potential for local leaders and local initiatives to move the country forward. Sometimes, for example, when we talk about middle income trap related challenges, we look at examples like China and Vietnam, where a lot of the growth in those two countries was basically by the central government creating a broad framework and allowing local government the autonomy to really go after the broad goals that were set by the national government. And they're very good examples of how competition and leadership at the local level can really help make a huge difference over a longer period of time. So what is the role then of international agencies in all of this? Well, in many ways, I think when we think about SDG localization and the role that we can play, clearly our starting point is to work within the framework of central government goals and policies. And so, it's very easy for us to see how we can contribute in a wide variety of ways to support the Thai government on its journey towards the SDGs. At the same time, we try to do as much as we can analysis of particular local contexts and the development challenges and the opportunities in those places that can inform central government policy. So I'll mention in a minute some research that we've done over the years in the Northeast, where we try to basically debunk a number of the myths and assumptions about labor mobility and about incomes in the Northeast and education, as a way of trying to say, hey, there are new opportunities in the Northeast. The Northeast, Thailand's success in meeting the SDGs, it's going to be essential for the Northeast as well to make progress on the SDGs. And what more can be done within that context to allow local initiatives to flourish? So we often as well take some of that analysis and we try to support government to find promising local models, identify opportunities that they might support, particularly in education more recently. And we support local initiatives, sometimes through technical assistance or facilitating dialogue, or sometimes just raising the profile of these initiatives. And along with this public-private and civil society collaboration or dialogue as much as we can. Okay, so just a couple of really quick examples because I know we're running out of time. On education reform, we're about 3 years into an initiative right now where we try to basically bring together a group of very senior and experienced practitioners and experts on the Thai education system to look at what some of the challenges were to improve the quality of Thai education. One of the areas that they identified was on the role of leadership at the school level and at the local level. And so we've tried to work with the ministry and others to think about what could be done from a policy perspective to really improve the opportunities for local leadership in improving the education system. We've also been doing quite a bit of public awareness raising, including through MCOT documentaries that have been broadcast several times recently, and as well have been supporting something called thailandlearning.org, which is a platform basically that educators and students can use to find the best online learning resources that are out there during the pandemic and during school lockdowns. Similarly, towards SDG 8, we've been working at the ASEAN level with Google, a partnership between us, Google, and ASEAN, specifically the ASEAN Coordinating Committee on Micro, Small, and Medium Enterprises, to try to support 200,000 small businesses and micro businesses across the region to move online or to find new ways of keeping their businesses afloat during the pandemic. Now, this has been quite interesting because to take Kun Pramwun's terminology of bringing the SDGs to earth, this has been basically trying to come up with regional frameworks and make them relevant for people right down on the ground that are going through a crisis with their micro business to see what benefits and how they can stay afloat using online technology and social media. The Iucn study I already mentioned started off as really inspired by various stories within the Northeast of success stories. How can Khon Kaen or how can other municipalities in the Northeast really move quickly on a number of areas? And then basically we used perception surveys and extensive local research to unpack the views of people in the Northeast. And there were some quite surprising results that we have shared extensively with government and are now trying to think about ways of moving that forward. For example, we found that there's much, much less appeal these days for young people in the Northeast to move to Bangkok for employment. People are trying to find ways of staying in the Northeast and making a living there because the quality of life is so much better. So how can
Tom, excuse me to interrupt.
Yep.
Just, yes, thank you, please.
I'll be just one more minute. Thank you.
Thank you.
So so we've been looking at ways of trying to tap into that potential to allow people to find their improve their businesses and to stay in the Northeast for the longer term. Okay, let me just go ahead and skip to the end then. All right, great. So finally, just on a few lessons learned, as I mentioned, I think as much as we can to respect and support Thai capacity and potential solutions rather than importing solutions from abroad. In addition, international agencies like us can be very helpful in facilitating collaboration across sectors, between government, across different parts of government as well, to try to advance some of these areas. It's important as well not to rush into solutions. So for example, with our education reform program, we took 2 years to really unpack the various challenges within the system there before we landed on the importance of instructional leadership as a key area for moving forward there. And then finally, helping government at the central level to see the value in localized initiatives and to help unleash local energy and creativity. Thank you very much, and sorry for going longer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thomas Parks, for the interesting presentations and sharing the lessons with respect to local context. Try to avoid important solutions, facilitate collaboration across sectors, unpacking complex problems, and your last statement, which was unleashing local energy and creativity. These are very useful lessons to learn from. Now, I saw we have run out of time. I saw in the chat room some interactions already between the audience and some speakers. So leave it at that. I just would like to leave the session with one commentary. I saw a comment in the chat as to, or a question, how can we connect different projects so we can work together for the best possible outcomes? It's a very valid comment. And this brings me to the concept of SDGs not being in silos. Although when you see SDGs, they are presented in boxes, but actually it's a network of goals. There are interlinkages. So if we learn the interlinkages among the various goals and targets, then we will be able to perhaps synergize the different projects and work together within the organization and across organizations, across different agencies and so on. So I'm very sorry that we don't have much time. In fact, we are over time. And so I would like to thank all the three speakers. I saw a lot of commendations for fascinating presentations, and we all learn from you, and we look forward to see you again in the future. So with that, we close session 4. So over to Dr. Montip, please.
So thank you very much, Professor Mario Tapakanan. I'd like to go ahead now with session 5. I'm pleased to introduce Mr. Robert Dobies, former head Climate Change Coordination Asian Development Bank, as moderator for session 5, SDG Aligned Financing. Mr. Robert, please.
Thank you, Dr. Montip. We're very lucky today to have 2 senior representatives from the multilateral development banks with us that are located in Bangkok, Ms. Birgit Hansel and Mr. Jay Roop. Jay is the Deputy Country Director for the Thailand Resident Mission for ADB, and Ms. Hansel is the Country Manager for the World Bank in Thailand. So Jay, let me start with you, please. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Bob. Nice to see you again. And I would like to share my screen. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear.
All right, now let's see if I can make this.
And your screen has come up.
Okay. I think I'm going to have to show it like this, if that's all right. Can you see that all right? Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jay. I'm from the Asian Development Bank. If you haven't heard of ADB before, it's a multilateral development bank. Its headquarters is based in Manila. It was formed in 1966 from a treaty of several different countries. It now has 68 member countries, of which 40 are in Asia and Pacific. We call them development member countries. So our overarching objective is poverty reduction and sustainable development. That's what we've been doing for the last 50 odd years. In fact, our first project was actually here in Thailand. So we've been in Thailand a long time. Our general work is aimed to support what we call Strategy 2030, which is our 10-year strategy. And our 10-year strategy also supports the Sustainable Development Goals. So we have 7 operational priorities, and those operational priorities are used to support the SDGs. So I'm just showing you the operational priorities now. That's what the OPs are. So you can see there, the first one is addressing remaining poverty and reducing inequality. The second one's accelerating progress in gender. The third one's tackling climate change and disaster resilience and environmental sustainability. The fourth is making cities more livable. The fifth is promoting rural development and food security. The sixth is strengthening governance and institutional capacity. And the seventh is fostering regional cooperation. So those are our 7 OPs, as we call them. And you can see that and then we also have a number of cross-cutting areas. So if you see that basically it's just a matter of mapping our 7 priorities on to the full number of the SDGs. When we actually do this work in partnership, so I'm going to describe 2 partnerships, how we work. The first is partnership with UNSCAP and within UNSCAP. And we have a long-standing regional cooperation with UNSCAP and UNDP to support regional progress on the SDGs. And this is an important example of our partnerships for knowledge and policy dialogue, which is highly valued by ADB. So through this partnership, we jointly invest in making data on SDG progress in our regional, as well as supporting SDG dialogue and progress with a lot of different kinds of stakeholders. We also provide regional perspective on challenges and opportunities to make progress on the SDG agenda. So since 2020, our partnership has focused on the linkages between COVID recovery and the SDG statement. And you can see some of the documents that we've done together over the last few years. More broadly, and we've worked with all the different multilateral development banks, including the World Bank, and Birgit's coming up next after me, to develop basically an overview of the MDB's multilateral development bank contribution to SDGs. So this report was done in 2020 and will be updated. And it's something that really took a lot of effort on the MDB's part, is to put together what have they been doing to support each SDG. So in what I'm giving you right now is just the overall view of what ADB as an organization does within ADB, and also what ADB does with its UN partners and with the MDBs to support sustainable development goals. Very high level stuff. Now I'd like to shift to talk a little bit more about Thailand. You can see that we support sustainable development goals in Thailand through our country partnership strategy. So our country partnership strategy is something that was just acknowledged by the Thai cabinet and endorsed by ADB's board just a couple of months ago. This partnership strategy has two objectives. One is to support competitiveness and connectivity in Thailand, and the other objective is to support resilience and sustainability. And then as well, we have a number of cross-cutting themes in gender, emerging social issues, regional cooperation, institutional strengthening, and supporting the SDGs. If you look at this graph that you have right in front of you, or the diagram, you can see that it's got little lines that go up from the objectives and the cross-cutting themes to 5 different topics. Those topics are actually the national strategy, 5 national strategies that support the 20-year strategy for Thailand. So in this way, all of the activities that we do are actually designed to support competitiveness, eco-friendly development, public sector development, human capital, and social cohesion. So those are the 5 national strategies that we support. I think something interesting about the way that we work here in Thailand, and Tom alluded to this, or he mentioned it, is that you do have to work differently in Thailand. We agree with that point very much. We work here with Thailand to actually work in other countries, and we work for Thailand to support Thailand. And sometimes we just work in Thailand because it's a great place to work, and we have a lot of co-location of other staff members here from ADB. Another way that's special about the way that we work is we have this, if you see a box on the right called Integrated One ADB Solutions. That means that when we come to the table, we come to the table with our private sector team, because we do private sector financing and development, as well as sovereign financing and development. And we do them both at the same time. And so as something similar to what Tom said, he says, we come in here trying to solve problems. I'd say that ADB is similar in that regard. We come in, we work with issues and try to solve problems, and how we solve that problem really depends upon what the needs of the country are. So just really briefly, I'd like to go through our country partnership strategy and show you how they're supporting each different SDG. And what I'm going to do here, I'm not going to go through individual projects, but rather just the areas that we work in. And then later I'll explain how we actually map on the SDGs for each individual project. So the first objective that we support is competitiveness and connectivity. And this is really about digital technology. It could be, digital connectivity, or it could be physical connectivity. There are lots of different ways of connectivity that we support the country, and we support it within the country, but we also work with Thailand to support regional connectivity as well. Again, it could be infrastructure, it could be trade, it could be a lot of different ways. So we see this term connectivity very broadly. Because one of the issues here in Thailand in the region is the more that we can improve connectivity, the more that we can support development. And I think this refers back to an earlier presentation from, I think it was Raxtai, about trying to access those people that can't be accessed. That's connectivity to us. That's how we see it. So that's one of our key objectives here. Another thing that we're really keen on is competitiveness. So Thailand, as an upper middle income country, it's not just about poverty reduction, but making Thailand help achieve its goal to become an upper income country. So to do that, it has to become much more competitive. So that's why we have an objective supporting competitiveness. Next, our second objective is really about supporting sustainability and resilience. So a lot of this work, say our greenhouse gas emissions, as you see our first point here, that's actually largely done by our private sector team. The government's role in supporting, the government has a strong role in supporting greenhouse gas emissions, but a lot of the investment is actually being done by private sector. So it's our private sector team that's supporting this activity the most. We're also helping government and private sector adapt to climate risks through knowledge sharing and building in a whole bunch of sectors, including energy and transport and agriculture. They're all activities that we're doing right now. We also support environmental sustainability through other means, such as like developing markets for electric vehicles. One of our new projects is the e-ferry. So for those of you that live in Bangkok, soon you'll see electric ferries going up and down the Chao Phraya River. So that's something that's co-financed by ADB. We also develop financial instruments. You might have heard the government talk about green bonds, sustainability bonds, thematic bonds. That's another activity that we're really involved with. And then finally, we look at strengthening regional public goods. This is again back to the working with Thailand to help Thailand share its knowledge on regional or transboundary programs in climate change, clean energy, environmental sustainability. And you can see the three SDGs that this broadly supports. And then I'll explain on the SDGs. Those first two objectives, those are mostly funded by what we call loans or projects. So those are generally very large size. And then in addition to that, we have cross-cutting themes that support activities within those loans or projects that look at social and economic inclusion, regional cooperation, strengthening institutions, emerging social issues, and so on. So these are some of the activities that we would call a value add to many of our loans or projects to help support the SDGs. So those, I said I was going to talk about projects. So those are the basic approaches that we have, but I will tell you about how we map the SDGs on to projects. So what we do is when we have in our internal computer system, when we have a new project, we have to list a bunch of information. All your institutions probably have the same thing. We have the log, how much is being spent and what it's being for and all that sort of stuff. And in that we have tags for the SDGs and then what the SDGs support. So when we give our reports from ADB or through the multilateral development banks about what we're doing to support that, that's actually done through a bottom-up approach of tagging SDGs at the project level. So, and we're also actually starting some new technical assistance and financing programs specifically supporting countries to assess SDG implementation. It's a new thing for us. Previously, we've been talking about how we support SDGs. Very recently, we're getting more interested in how we directly assess SDG implementation. And this is something that we're actually doing in cooperation with the Iucn, and we're grateful for that. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jay. It's interesting to hear about ADB's regional approach, the two-sided regional approach, working with Thailand, going out to the region, and I think also working with the region to bring in experience to Thailand. I understand that Ms. Hansel is with us now, so I would like to invite her to take the floor, please.
Thank you so much, Sawadika, and good afternoon to everybody. The pleasure of being one of the last speakers is that perhaps a lot of things were already said, and I could hear from Jay's presentation that there are a lot of similarities when we look at the support that the World Bank provides to Thailand in the context of the achievement of the SDGs with us. And I will reflect on this on a few slides that we have prepared. But thank you again for inviting us to this event, Kun Montip, and for organizing these interesting discussions. So next slide, please. So our engagement from the World Bank Group with the Thai authorities are through our partnership framework, which is called Country Partnership Strategy, and very much aligned with what we do in other countries that are in the upper middle income or higher income bracket. It is primarily a knowledge-based partnership, because financing in itself is perhaps not the main constraints in these countries. And we operate in many, of course, lower income and lower middle income bracket. But here the provision is really on targeted support to mainly focus on two SDGs. And I would say SDGs, of course, as you discussed, have different importance, many, but the key ones that are close to our vision is SDG 1, of course, no poverty. So this is our vision as well at the World Bank to end extreme poverty globally. and the SDG 10 on reduced inequality, which is slightly different formulated for us in terms of increasing shared prosperity, where we think the bottom 40% of the population should have higher income growth than the rest, because otherwise there will be no catch up at any point, and more equality across society. So this is really the heart of our partnership with Thailand, to provide knowledge that helps on the achievement of these high-level SDGs, and then supporting throughout the program many other SDGs. There is an option, by the way, to also have financing based on government demand. Next, please. Thank you. So what the objective for us is really to support Thailand in its ambition. And these are, of course, aligned in our country partnership framework, or CPF, with the 20-year national strategy. The NESDB plans, the 12th and the coming 13th, and what we can bring to the table as comparative advantage, which is really focused around these SDG 1 and SDG 10. What is perhaps also our comparative advantage, that we can bring knowledge from the global arena, from all countries, from all parts of the world to the table, which of course is also something we see other partners do, but we can do much more systematically because we are engaged with all governments, and we can easily connect countries with each other from Latin America, from Middle East or other countries. And that's of course related to the SDG 17 on partnership for goals. Next, please. So if we unpack it a bit further under this objective, we really have a focus on two areas. One is around promoting resilient and sustainable growth. That's what we at the World Bank stand for. That is really our core interest. And we then break it up into 4 further sub-objectives under that, to work on competitiveness and the business environment, and on financial and fiscal institutions policy implementation, infrastructure improvements, and climate change and water resource management. Next, please. And the second key pillar for us is strengthening inclusion, also very much in line with the objectives that we have in terms of the higher level 2 SDGs 1 and 10, of no poverty and reduced inequality. And within Thailand, really the focus is on social protection, strengthening and inclusion of vulnerable groups, and promoting quality education. So you see perhaps in both of these pillars, we don't do everything, and that's true in most of our countries. So when we put our country partnership framework together, we usually have what is called a strategic country diagnostic for all countries, and that is an internal comprehensive analysis of development challenges for a country in terms of inclusive and sustainable growth. That's a document and analysis we do completely independent from our engagement with our country counterparts. So this is an analysis that is owned by the bank, that is not reviewed by counterparts, but this is our honest assessment of the challenges, and it's completely evidence-based. So it's a tough challenge for our teams to come up and put these diagnostics together. And based on the identified priorities we see there, we come up then in discussions with our counterparts what our partnership is and what would be useful in terms of value added for our counterparts. And you can see that's why it's a selection of topics that or objectives that we have under our country partnership framework, but it is based on the evidence that we have done as in terms of analysis under our strategic country diagnostic in each country. Next, please. And I wanted to just circle back to our engagement in upper middle income countries like Thailand. And you can see that if we look at our lending portfolios globally, the lending engagements or financing, which is the topic of this session, is relatively small for upper middle income countries. And yes, it is exactly what, of course, also Tom said, that we are here to provide knowledge and solve problems. But we are also seeing that very often things can change quite fast when there is a crisis, even when the financing is not the critical issue, like in Thailand. But often we can come in to help analytical or even potential financing that sends positive signals to the markets during a crisis, or provide confidence to markets to continue to lend to countries that suddenly find themselves in a crisis, and shows that there's willingness to reform and tackle difficult structural issues that could bring a country back into a more positive development path. So these are quite important areas why we continue to engage in UMIC countries, and why many upper middle income and high income countries still engage with us, but also still actually have a lending relationship with us. So we have many high income countries that are coming to us for lending in periods of crisis, but also to test and try investment in certain sectors through our projects, which create the space where they can try things that perhaps normally are not done, like using the latest technology in infrastructure, or latest institutional setup for a school system, where they can try things in a small safeguarded space, and then think about if that should be rolled out with their own resources to the whole country. That's very typical, for instance, of our engagement in China, which is really using us very proactively to find out new ways how to do things through the investment projects that we have, though clearly the lending, the financing need is not really the binding constraint for their investments. That is always helping then also to fine-tune these national programs or make them more effective. But I can see that I'm running out of time, so let me stop here, and thank you very much for the discussion and for letting us talk a bit about our program here in Thailand, and what we see as engagements in upper middle income countries in terms of financing. Thank you so much. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Birgit. So it's pretty clear from what you said and also from what Jay said, that the banks have moved from being primarily a project lender, a lender to project, a financer of projects, to multifaceted institutions. And actually, you weren't bad on time at all. We have a couple of minutes, 5 minutes left. If I could ask a quick question of either of you. It's actually a burning question in my mind, because we were hearing today about all of the activities that are happening in Thailand. A lot of these are pilot activities. And I'm sure some of these will go on to be quite successful, but if history is any guide, many of them, if not most, will gradually wither for lack of support. So you have a nice, successful pilot project, and all the lessons and the capacities to maybe move this forward are lost due to various factors. I'm just wondering whether an institution like the World Bank or like ADB has a role in identifying some of these successful pilot projects and giving them a boost so we can scale up some of these successful pilots. Either of you. Or neither of you, whichever you prefer.
Birgit, would you please feel free to go ahead. I got to speak first, so would you like to start?
No problem. Apologies. I thought I got the signal to stop speaking because the slide switched to the last one. So apologize. I could have talked longer, but it's good that we have some time for discussion. But this is exactly actually the point, right, that you're bringing up, because yes, the financing is not the binding constraints, right, for upper middle income and high income countries, but still how to do things differently and how to create these spaces, how to do things differently that are a bit ring fenced, right, to everything that has to go on every day, and delivering of services and so on. Government is exactly, I think, the role we are playing, as I mentioned. So yes, it is the projects we do have, and the projects that we are developing with the government at this point are all pilot projects. Very exactly like you say, to start something different, right? Because governments do know some programs that they have are perhaps not optimal and effective as they would like to. But because you have to deliver as a government every day, you cannot just stop and say, well, let me think for a couple of years and come back to you as citizen and then give you a better program. So we do these programs together with the government, where we feel that this is very important for our counterparts, but it's also really in line with the SDGs that we support on inclusivity and sustainability. We also are engaged in many countries on the scaling up then, right, of these projects to provide, but not on a project basis, but to provide to the programs of governments financial support or co-financing that is actually less in terms of the money that goes into it, but in helping the monitoring and evaluation of these programs. And these are specific instruments we call programs for results, where we just put a small amount forward, for instance, compared to what the government puts into these programs. But we provide technical and analytical support to make sure the programs and the challenges they face on a daily basis are also answered going forward. So let me just stop here and hand it to Jay.
Thanks, Bria. Jay, any thoughts?
Thanks, Bob. I think you just described how I spend about 20 or 30% of every day at work is trying to understand, okay, if we do this, so what? What happens next? How can we make it bigger? How can we upscale it? How can it be replicated? How can we make something more than the resources that we have? Because although we are a bank, as Birgit pointed out, like for World Bank, the resources that we have for lending, it's not the main thing that we're doing here. We're largely doing knowledge building, knowledge sharing, advisory support, and private sector development. So we really have to think about how we use those small amounts of resources that we have and make something bigger for them. And we have lots and lots of activities going in this country, but every new country activity that comes in, we say, okay, well, we finished the activity, now what? How are we going to make it bigger? What are we going to do with it? And if we don't have an answer, if it's just going to stop and do nothing, then it's often the solution is maybe don't do it. So I know that you're us saying, okay, now that we've done this activity together, what happens next? And if neither of us know what the answer is, it might not always be something that we think would be a very good idea to do. So yes, I think you've touched an important point for us. Thank you.
So let me thank both of you once again, particularly for giving us some time today. I remember my 14-hour days at the Asian Development Bank. I know the two of you are very busy, and we appreciate you giving us time this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Kapunka, my pleasure.
So perhaps I'll just move in to the final session. Session 6 on the summary, conclusion, and take-home messages. We have two speakers to help us conclude. The first will be Ms. Ricky Hansen, who is the acting director of the Statistics Division at UNSCAP. Ms. Hansen, could I ask you to provide us with your thoughts, please?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Robert, and greetings from SCAP and my working from home station here in Bangkok. So SCAP has been really delighted to partner with NRCT, UN Thailand, NESDC, Mahidol University, AIT, the Digital Belt and Road Center of Excellence, to deliver this series of conferences. And the key word for these conferences is really delivering together. And that has also been a message which has come out very clearly in the third conference of today. We've heard the calls to collaborate more closely and across more types of institutions and organizations in all the sessions, actually, both the one on big data, the one on green planet, the one on localizing SDGs, and what we just heard now in terms of financing. And that, of course, sends a very strong message from this conference that we do need a whole of society approach to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals in Thailand. I will not try to summarize all the very good inputs that we've all benefited from during the past couple of hours. Instead, what I would do is to provide a few reflections from the data and statistics perspective. Of course, because data and statistics is my field, but also because data is so central to all the topics that we have covered in the conference today. So when we talk about statistics, we are not necessarily talking about a whole of society approach, but what we are talking about is a whole of data system approach, or in other words, a data ecosystem approach. And why are we doing that? Well, we all know, and we've also heard from several speakers, that data is generated, owned, held, used by multiple partners. And the second reason for talking about a data ecosystem is that only used data is useful data. And to put meaning into data requires collaboration across all these different actors in the data ecosystem. And much of the work we are doing as statisticians is really focused on this, to create meaning out of data so that they can be used. Often when we talk about the sustainable goals, development goals, the focus is very much on using data to monitor the goals. But actually, we should be talking about many more use cases when we talk about data. First and foremost, data for planning purposes, which is just as central to implementing the Sustainable Development Goals. Data for monitoring, data for evaluation. And what we should also be looking at is that looking at data for the SDGs is not just something that we look at for broad national planning for acting and decisions made by government agencies, but certainly just as much when we look at the various parts of societies that have a role, civil society organizations, businesses, academia, and all of us as individuals making our decisions on the basis of the information that's involved. So the power of data is really found in the use of data. And all the uses I've just mentioned are fully relevant to implementing the Sustainable Development Goals in Thailand. And that usefulness of the data is where collaboration comes in very strongly. In addition to all the different holders and generators and producers of data and statistics, well, the users, of course, need to be put into this equation. We need to establish much closer links between policy and data, between science, data, and policy. And for that, we need to focus on one thing, which is something that is very central to ESCAP's work on statistics at the moment, and also is very central to the whole global data and statistics community. And that relates to data leadership and stewardship. And this is something we need to see to a much larger extent across sectors. We need stewardship when we talk about legal and regulatory frameworks that governs the use of data. We need guidance on data privacy, on involvement of citizens and their needs for support. When we talk about access to data, sustainability of data and data partnerships, we need collaboration and stewardship when we talk about the necessary technological infrastructure to ensure the interoperability that has to underpin any data collaborative. And of course, the capacity and skills, which has been mentioned by several speakers today, is also paramount. And one institution which almost every government in the world has, including Thailand, is a National Statistical Office. And this institution is arguably the institution which is best placed to play this role of data stewardship. But it does require quite a few changes, and this is something that many countries are facing, including Thailand. And this is a matter of putting in place the framework for statistical offices to play this role of national data steward. We see emerging policies by several countries in the world, data governance policies, and this is one of the things ESCAP is focusing on, to make sure that these examples are documented and shared as they do become available and lessons are being learned. So this is just one strong message I want to send here, because it is so relevant to the work that's going on in Thailand on the Sustainable Development Goals, and collaborating on data is something that also can pull agencies together to work on policies and the other way around. So we have a great opportunity for some virtual cycles to be initiated here. So with that, I'll end my remarks here and thank all contributors during the day. Back to you, Robert.
Thank you very much, Rike. And now to lead us to the conclusion of the webinar, I would like to, and to give us her reflections and words of wisdom, I would like to invite Dr. Montip back. Dr. Montip.
Thank you very much, Mr. Robert Dovies. So I would like to inform you about the outcome and lesson learned from this conference, provide the insight and guidance toward the SDG implementation in Thailand and in sharing them nationally, regionally, and globally. Here is the summary of the conference. I'd like to show the PowerPoint. So international agencies contribute substantially to various aspects of SDGs implementation in terms of SDGs advocacy, integrating SDGs into action, plan, policy, support, localization, creating multi-stakeholder partnerships, financing, and monitoring. Next. So monitoring progress is key to effective SDG governance. UNSCAP and DIBA have shared their programs on translating global SDG indicators for national relevance and usefulness in localizing the indicators. They highlighted innovative big data approaches to SDGs monitoring, sourcing, use, and challenges despite incremental improvements. Next. So restoring a green planet is fundamental to successful SDG implementation. SEI, Iucn, and I just shared the innovative programs that are transdisciplinary, cutting across science, policy, and practice, focusing on their respective thematic priorities such as climate, resource use, resilient ecosystem, health and well-being, applying participatory approaches and nature-based solutions. The ASEAN SDGs Frontrunner Cities program, for example, is an illustration of a bottom-up approach of what is realistically possible through voluntary efforts. Next. So localization of the SDGs is flaunt and carry implementation agenda, UNDP, Thai Foundation, and Asia Foundation initiative in Thailand suggest that localization process is a cross-cutting approach that facilitates the country transformation, improve human capital, participate in and benefit from development based on local context, employing a bottom-up approach, enable collaboration across sectors, utilize local energy and creativity, and promote empowerment of local stakeholders and communities for impacting poverty alleviation and equality. But SDG implementation entails mobilization of resource, sustainable financing is essential. ADB and the World Bank support mobilizing finance for the SDGs, the objectives of competitiveness and connectivity, resilience, and sustainability are cross-cutting SDG goals and targets and provide value-added knowledge and finance solutions. SDG financing policy and program are allied to national strategies, knowledge-based partnerships in supporting of the country's transformation towards an innovative, inclusive, and sustainable economy. Next. So finally, on behalf of the Digital Belt and Road International Center of Excellence, DIBA, ICOE Bangkok, National Research Council of Thailand, I express profound gratitude to the conference co-organizers of NRCT, namely the United Nations Resident Coordinator Office, UN Thailand, UNSCAP, and collaborators, namely DIBA and ESDC, Mahidol University, and the Asian Institute of Technology, which provide excellent technical support. We also greatly acknowledge all speakers, moderators, and supporters from international agencies, namely UNSCAP, SEI, Asia, Iucn, IGES, UN Environment, UNDP, Thai Foundation, OK International, the Asia Foundation, Asian Development Bank, World Bank, Digital Belt and Road Program, and the United Nations University Institute for the Advanced Study of Sustainability. I thank you all very much. To all participants, we are profoundly grateful to you to join us, and we do hope that you will join us again in our future offering. We will see you then. And thank you so much. The conference is now adjourned, and I wish you and stay safe. Thank you very much. สวัสดีค่ะ